a missing diamond bracelet, a terrified hospitality worker trapped in a mansion full of wealthy predators, and one phone call that would change everything. When Lena Vale dialed the most dangerous man in New York City, she had no idea that Damian Moretti would burn down the entire social order to protect her. This is a story about power, invisibility, and the moment when silence becomes louder than violence. Watch until the end to see how a single night transforms two lives forever. And don't forget to hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Rain didn't just fall that night, it attacked. Each drop hammered against the glass walls of the Whitmore estate like bullets, turning the sprawling mansion into an aquarium of wealth where servers moved like ghosts and guests pretended the world outside didn't exist. Lena Vale had perfected invisibility. 26 years old, slender frame always slightly hunched, dark hair pulled back so tight it made her temples ache. She wore the standard black uniform that marked her as staff, interchangeable, disposable, beneath notice. She'd learned early that survival meant making yourself smaller, quieter, less. The Whitmore Charity Gala was the kind of event where politicians shook hands with men who funded their campaigns through shell companies, where socialites wore jewelry worth more than most people earned in a decade, where power masked itself as philanthropy, and everyone pretended not to see the rot beneath the champagne and crystal. Lena carried trays through rooms that smelled like expensive perfume and older money. She kept her eyes down, her steps light, her presence erased. She'd been working these events for 3 years through the hospitality agency, and she'd learned the unspoken rules. Never make eye contact, never speak unless spoken to, never react when hands lingered too long or comments cut too deep. Survival. That was the game. "More champagne over here," a woman in an emerald gown called out, snapping her fingers without looking. Lena moved immediately, refilling glasses while conversations continued around her like she wasn't even human. They talked about stock portfolios and vacation homes in the Hamptons, about whose daughter got into which Ivy League school, about renovations that cost more than Lena would see in her lifetime. She was furniture, useful when needed, ignored otherwise. The main hall stretched 3 stories high, with a grand staircase spiraling upward beneath chandeliers that threw fractured light across marble floors. 200 guests, minimum, maybe more. Lena had stopped counting hours ago. Her feet ached inside the practical black flats she wore. Her lower back screamed from carrying heavy trays, and the headache building behind her eyes promised to get worse before the night ended. But she needed this job, needed the money, needed to stay invisible long enough to survive another month in a city that chewed up people like her and spit them out without ceremony. "Did you see what Margaret was wearing?" A woman's voice drifted past. Absolutely tragic. All that money and no taste whatsoever. Lena kept moving. The kitchen operated like controlled chaos. Chefs shouting orders, servers grabbing trays, managers barking instructions. Lena slipped through the madness to grab another tray of hors d'oeuvres, her mind already calculating how many more hours until she could leave, how much she'd make tonight, whether it would be enough to cover rent and still eat something besides ramen. "Table 7 needs refills," the floor manager snapped. "And someone check the West Terrace. Mrs. Whitmore wants fresh flowers out there." Lena nodded and kept moving. That was when everything changed. She didn't see it happen, didn't witness the moment that would destroy her night. She was in the hallway between the main room and the terrace, carrying a tray of champagne flutes, when the first whispers started. Something about a bracelet. Missing. Valuable. Stolen. The word moved through the party like poison in water, quiet at first, then louder, gaining momentum and malice with each repetition. Lena felt the shift in atmosphere before she understood what caused it. Conversations turning sharper, eyes becoming suspicious, the air itself growing colder. She kept her head down and kept working. That was her mistake, because invisibility only protected you until someone needed a target. "Everyone stop what you're doing," the voice cut through the background noise like a knife. Mrs. Catherine Whitmore stood at the top of the grand staircase, one hand on the railing, the other gesturing dramatically. Mid-50s, blonde hair that cost a fortune to maintain, wearing a gown that probably cost more than a car. "My diamond bracelet is missing. No one leaves until we find it." The party froze. Lena's stomach dropped. She'd seen this before. Different event, different item, same outcome. Rich people lost things all the time, misplaced them, forgot where they put them, got too drunk to remember taking them off. And when they couldn't find their precious belongings, they always looked for someone to blame, someone disposable. Check the staff, a man's voice suggested. That's where these things usually end up. Lena's hands tightened on the tray she carried. No, not like this. Not tonight. But the floor manager was already moving toward her, his expression apologetic but firm. Lena, Mrs. Whitmore needs to speak with you. Ice flooded her veins. I didn't. Just come with me. Please. Every eye in the room turned toward her. The weight of their stares crushed the air from her lungs. She saw their expressions. Not concern, not fairness, just cold calculation. She was staff. She was nobody. She was convenient. Lena set down the tray with trembling hands and followed the manager through the crowd. People moved aside like she carried a disease, their faces arranged in careful neutrality that somehow felt worse than open hostility. Mrs. Whitmore descended the staircase like a queen addressing peasants. You were near my sitting room earlier. The bracelet was on my dresser. Now it's gone. I never went into your sitting room, Lena said quietly. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. I've been serving in the main hall in the terrace all night. Someone saw you upstairs. That's not true. Mrs. Whitmore's eyes hardened. Are you calling my guests liars? The trap closed around her. If she defended herself too forcefully, she'd be accused of being aggressive, disrespectful, difficult. If she stayed quiet, they'd take it as guilt. There was no winning move. There never had been. I'm just saying I didn't take anything, Lena managed. You can check my bag, check my pockets. I don't have your bracelet. Oh, we will, Mrs. Whitmore assured her. Security is already reviewing the footage. Until then, you'll wait in the private lounge. Not a request. A command. The floor manager touched Lena's elbow gently, almost apologetically, and guided her toward a door off the main hallway. The private lounge was smaller than the other rooms, decorated in dark wood and leather furniture that smelled expensive. A single lamp provided dim light. Then the door closed. Lena stood alone in the semi-darkness while the party continued beyond the walls like nothing had happened. Laughter echoed distantly. Music played, glasses clinked. Life moved forward for everyone except her. Her hands shook. She sat down on one of the leather chairs and tried to control her breathing. This wasn't fair. She hadn't done anything wrong. But fairness didn't matter when you had no power, no connections, no way to fight back. They would blame her, fire her, maybe press charges just to make an example. She'd lose her job, lose her reputation, lose everything she'd struggled to build in a city that already wanted her to fail. Tears burned behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Crying wouldn't help. Crying never helped. Her phone sat heavy in her uniform pocket. For a long moment, she just stared at the dark screen. There was someone she could call. Someone who'd told her once, years ago, in a different life, that if she ever needed help, really needed it, he would come. But that person terrified her almost as much as this situation did. Damian Moretti. The name alone carried weight in New York. Whispered in back rooms and dark corners, never said too loud, never said carelessly. He owned things that couldn't be owned legally, controlled people who pretended not to be controlled, moved through the city like a storm system. You felt his presence long before you saw him, and the damage always came after. Lena had met him 3 years ago under circumstances she tried not to think about. A debt her late father had left behind. A conversation in a restaurant kitchen while she worked a catering shift, terrified and desperate. Damian had looked at her the way most people didn't, like she was actually visible, and he'd made the debt disappear with a single phone call. Then he'd given her his private number. If you ever need help, he'd said quietly, call me. She never had, because people like her didn't call people like him unless they were prepared for what came after. But tonight she had no other options. Her fingers trembled as she pulled out her phone. The number was still saved under DM. Nothing more, nothing less. She stared at it for 30 seconds that felt like 30 minutes. Then she pressed call. It rang twice. Lena. His voice was exactly as she remembered, low, controlled, carrying the kind of authority that didn't need volume. He'd known it was her before answering. Of course he had. Can you come get me? The words came out barely above a whisper, silence on the other end. Not empty silence, the kind that felt like pressure building. "Where are you?" Damien asked. She told him. "Don't move," he said. "I'm coming." The line went dead. Lena sat in the dim lounge with her phone clutched in both hands, listening to rain hammer the windows and wondering what she'd just set in motion. Across the city, in a penthouse boardroom that overlooked Manhattan like a throne room, Damien Moretti stood up from a table surrounded by 8 men who controlled various pieces of New York's underground economy. They'd been in negotiations for 2 hours. Money laundering pipelines, territory adjustments, the kind of business that required careful diplomacy and measured threats. All of it stopped the second Damien's phone rang. The men watched him take the call, watched his expression, already severe, shift into something colder, watched him end the conversation and pocket his phone without explanation. "We're done here," Damien said quietly. Marcus Chen, who controlled the shipping routes through Red Hook, started to protest. "We haven't finished. We're done." The tone left no room for argument. Damien walked out without another word, his security detail falling into formation around him. They moved through the building like a machine, efficient and silent, reaching the ground floor where 3 black SUVs waited under the building's private entrance. "The Whitmore estate," Damien told his driver. "Fast." The vehicles cut through Manhattan traffic with practiced aggression. Inside the lead SUV, Damien sat perfectly still in the back seat, one hand resting against his knee, the other holding his phone. He replayed Lena's voice in his mind. Not the words, the restraint behind them, the quiet fear of someone who hated asking for help. That was what unsettled him. Lena Vale had never asked for anything. Not 3 years ago when he'd cleared her father's debt. Not in the time since. She'd disappeared back into her life like she'd never crossed paths with his world at all. Until tonight. Damien had built his empire on reading people, understanding what they wanted, what they feared, what they'd do when pushed to their limits. Lena was different. She didn't want anything except to be left alone. Didn't crave power or wealth or protection. She just wanted to survive. That made her dangerous in a way most people weren't, because someone who wanted nothing couldn't be bought, threatened, or controlled. The SUVs pushed through rain-slicked streets, past neighborhoods that gradually shifted from working class to wealthy, from honest to hidden. The Whitmore estate sat in an area where old money pretended to be respectable, while hosting the same criminals they publicly condemned. Damien knew the type well. Hypocrites with expensive jewelry and cheap morals. His phone buzzed. A text from Victor, his second-in-command, who was handling preliminary research. Catherine Whitmore, married to Judge Howard Whitmore. Known for charity galas and quiet influence. No criminal ties on record. Hosting tonight's event. Approximately 200 guests. Security is private, not police. Damien typed back, "Who's working security?" The response came immediately. "Meridian Protection Services. We have 3 people on their payroll. Call them." The city lights burned past the tinted windows like distant fires. Damien's expression never changed. His breathing remained even. But something cold and patient was building beneath his surface, the same controlled fury that had built his reputation. Someone had frightened Lena enough to call him. That was a mistake they'd regret. Back at the Whitmore estate, Lena sat in the private lounge while time crawled forward like a wounded animal. 15 minutes, 20, 30. No one came to check on her. No one brought updates. They'd locked her away and forgotten about her. Or worse, they were building a case, reviewing footage, constructing a narrative that would destroy her. Her phone buzzed. A text from Damien, 10 minutes. Lena closed her eyes and tried to control her breathing. She'd called him. He was coming. There was no taking it back now. Part of her wondered if this was worse than facing the accusations alone. Damien Moretti didn't solve problems quietly. He solved them permanently. And when he moved through the world, consequences followed like shadows. But she'd made her choice. The door to the lounge opened suddenly. Mrs. Whitmore stood in the doorway with 2 security guards flanking her. Her expression was cold triumph. "Security footage shows you entering the 2nd floor hallway. Care to explain that?" "I was looking for the restroom," Lena said. "A guest directed me upstairs." "How convenient. And did this mysterious guest also tell you to go into my private sitting room?" "I never went into your sitting room." Mrs. Whitmore smiled. The kind of smile that had nothing to do with warmth. "We'll let the police sort it out. They're on their way." Lena's heart stopped. Police meant arrest. Arrest meant charges. Charges meant her life was over. "I didn't take your bracelet," she said again, voice breaking slightly. "Please, I need this job. I didn't do anything wrong." "Then you have nothing to worry about." Mrs. Whitmore turned to leave. "Keep her here until the officers arrive." The security guards moved into position, not threatening, but present, making it clear Lena wasn't going anywhere. The door closed again. Lena sat back down, her whole body shaking now. This was it. This was how her life ended, accused of something she didn't do by people who'd never face consequences for destroying her. Her phone buzzed again. "I'm here." Lena looked toward the windows. Through the rain and darkness, she could barely make out movement in the circular driveway. Black vehicles. Multiple. Then she felt it, a change in the atmosphere. Subtle at first, like air pressure shifting before a storm. Conversations beyond the lounge door became quieter. Movement changed. Even the security guard standing watch seemed to tense. Something was happening. Footsteps in the hallway. Not rushed, not loud, just inevitable. The kind of footsteps that made people move aside without being asked. One of the security guards shifted uncomfortably. He touched his earpiece, listening to something. His expression changed, went from alert to uncertain to something that looked almost like fear. "What?" his partner whispered. "He's here." "Who?" Before the first guard could answer, the lounge door opened, and Damien Moretti walked into the room like he owned it. He was exactly as Lena remembered. Tall, lean build that his perfectly tailored black coat somehow made look dangerous instead of refined. Dark hair touched with gray at the temples. Sharp features that photographs never quite captured. And eyes that saw everything, missed nothing, and forgave even less. But what struck her most was the absolute stillness of his presence. He didn't need to threaten, didn't need to raise his voice. He simply existed in a space, and the rules changed around him. The security guard stepped back instinctively. Damien's gaze went directly to Lena. Not the guards, not the room, not the situation. Just her. "Are you hurt?" he asked quietly. Lena shook her head, not trusting her voice. "Good." Damien turned toward the security guards. "Leave." It wasn't a request. "Sir, we have orders." "Leave." Something in his tone made argument impossible. The guards exchanged glances, then walked out without another word. The door clicked shut behind them. Silence filled the lounge. Damien approached Lena slowly, giving her space, not crowding her. He pulled over a chair and sat down across from her, close enough to speak quietly, far enough to not feel threatening. "Tell me what happened," he said. So she did. The missing bracelet. The accusation. The trap she couldn't escape. The police being called. All of it spilled out in a rush of words that came faster as panic tried to claw its way back into her chest. Damien listened without interrupting. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. "You didn't take the bracelet," he said. Not a question, a statement of fact. "No," Lena whispered. "I swear I didn't. I need this job. I would never—" "I know." 2 words, but the certainty behind them hit her like a physical force. "The police are coming," Lena said. "They'll arrest me. No one is arresting you." "You can't stop the police." Something that might have been amusement flickered across Damien's expression. "Lena, the only reason police exist in this city is because people like me allow it. They're not coming." Before she could process that, voices erupted outside the lounge. Loud, argumentative. Mrs. Whitmore's voice carried through the door. "I don't care who he is. This is my home. He can't just—" The door opened again. Mrs. Whitmore stood in the doorway with her husband, Judge Howard Whitmore, a man in his 60s who looked like he'd spent his entire life being important and expecting people to remember it. Then Judge Whitmore saw who was sitting in his private lounge. His face went gray. "Mr. Moretti," he said carefully, "I wasn't aware you'd be attending tonight." "I wasn't invited," Damien said. "I'm here for Lena." Mrs. Whitmore's confidence faltered. "This woman stole my—" "She didn't steal anything." Damien stood up slowly. "And you're not calling the police." "We most certainly are." "Catherine." Judge Whitmore's voice was sharp. Warning. He knew something his wife didn't. But Mrs. Whitmore was too angry or too stupid to hear it. She's a thief. The footage clearly shows. I've seen the footage, a new voice interrupted. Victor appeared in the doorway. Damien's second in command, a Korean man in his 40s who looked like he worked in finance and killed people with the same efficiency. He held a tablet. Your security system is remarkably easy to access. Miss Vale did go upstairs to use the restroom, exactly as she said. She was gone 90 seconds. Your sitting room is at the end of a hallway that takes 2 minutes to walk. The timeline doesn't work. Mrs. Whitmore's face flushed. Then someone else. Your bracelet isn't missing. Victor turned the tablet around, showing security footage. It fell behind your dresser 20 minutes before the party started. You were drunk. You forgot. There was no theft. The silence that followed was brutal. Judge Whitmore closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, his expression was resigned defeat. Catherine, apologize. I will not apologize. Now. Mrs. Whitmore looked between her husband, Damien, and Lena. For a moment, rage and humiliation warred across her face. I apologize, she ground out. It was a misunderstanding. Lena couldn't speak, couldn't move, couldn't process what was happening. Damien placed a hand lightly on her shoulder, barely any pressure, just presence. Lena is leaving with me. If anyone has a problem with that, say it now. No one spoke. Good. Damien guided Lena toward the door. Judge Whitmore, we'll speak later about what happens when people in your home threaten things that belong to me. They walked through the mansion together while the party continued in other rooms. Guests who had no idea their entire social order had just shifted beneath their feet. Staff members who'd ignored Lena hours earlier now watched her pass with wide eyes and careful distance. The floor manager who'd escorted her to the lounge now stood frozen near the kitchen, his expression caught between terror and disbelief. Outside, rain fell steadily. 3 black SUVs waited in the circular driveway like predators. Damien opened the rear door of the center vehicle himself. You're safe now, he told her. Lena looked up at him, at this man who'd dropped everything and crossed the city because she'd whispered 4 words into a phone. Thank you, she managed. Damien's expression didn't change. Get in. She climbed into the SUV. Damien slid in beside her. The door closed with a heavy, final sound. As the vehicles pulled away from the Whitmore estate, Lena watched the mansion disappear through rain-streaked windows. And she realized with absolute certainty there was no going back to the life she'd had before tonight. Everything had changed, and she had no idea what came next. The SUV moved through Manhattan like a knife through dark water, windshield wipers beating a steady rhythm against rain that refused to stop. Lena sat pressed against the leather seat, her uniform still damp, her hands folded in her lap so tightly her knuckles had gone white. Damien sat beside her in silence. Not the awkward kind. The deliberate kind. The silence of someone who understood that words sometimes did more damage than good. Lena watched the city blur past through tinted windows. Streets she recognized became unfamiliar as they moved away from Manhattan's core, heading toward areas where buildings spread farther apart and money bought privacy instead of proximity. Where are we going? She finally asked. My estate, Damien said. Outside the city. You'll stay there tonight. I should go home. Your home isn't safe. Lena turned toward him. What does that mean? Damien's expression remained neutral, but something cold moved behind his eyes. Judge Whitmore has connections. His wife has a reputation for holding grudges. You humiliated them tonight, publicly, in front of their peers. People like that don't forget. I didn't do anything. No, I did. Damien looked at her directly. Which means they'll come after you to get to me, so you're not going home. Not tonight. The weight of that reality settled over Lena like concrete. She'd called him for help. He'd come. And now she was caught in whatever consequences followed. For how long? She whispered. Until I make it clear that touching you means war. The casual certainty in his voice made her stomach twist. This wasn't hypothetical. This wasn't exaggeration. This was how Damien Moretti operated. In absolutes, in consequences, in power that didn't need to announce itself. I don't want anyone hurt because of me, Lena said. Then you called the wrong person. The truth of it hung between them. Lena turned back toward the window, watching rain streak across glass. She'd spent 3 years avoiding this exact situation, avoiding debts, avoiding obligations, avoiding anything that might pull her into the gravitational field of people like Damien. Tonight, she'd failed. The SUV turned off the main highway onto a private road that wound through tall trees and iron gates that opened automatically. No signs, no markings, just expensive privacy that money bought and power protected. The Moretti estate emerged from darkness like something out of a different era, stone and steel, modern architecture blended with old-world fortification. Security lights illuminated a circular driveway where the vehicles finally stopped. Damien stepped out first. Rain soaked his coat immediately, but he didn't seem to notice. He opened Lena's door himself, offering his hand. She took it because refusing felt more dangerous than accepting. The house's interior was nothing like she'd expected. No ostentatious displays of wealth, no gold fixtures or marble statues, just clean lines, dark wood, expensive furniture that prioritized function over flash. It felt more like a fortress than a home. A woman in her 50s appeared from somewhere deeper in the house. Gray hair, sharp eyes, wearing casual clothes that somehow still looked professional. "This is Teresa," Damien said. "She manages the household. Teresa, this is Lena Vale. She'll be staying in the East Guest Suite." Teresa's expression didn't change. "Of course, Miss Vale, if you'll follow me." Lena glanced at Damien. "Get some rest," he told her. "We'll talk in the morning." Then he disappeared down a different hallway, leaving Lena with Teresa and a dozen questions she didn't know how to ask. The East Guest Suite was larger than Lena's entire apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked gardens that vanished into darkness. A king-size bed. Private bathroom with a shower that probably cost more than her monthly rent. Clothes already laid out. Soft pants, a cotton shirt, everything in her exact size. "Mr. Moretti called ahead," Teresa explained, reading Lena's expression. "The bathroom is stocked. If you need anything, there's a phone by the bed. Press 0. "Thank you." Teresa nodded and left, closing the door softly behind her. Lena stood alone in the middle of the suite, still wearing her damp uniform, still processing everything that had happened in the last 2 hours. She'd been accused of theft, nearly arrested, rescued by a man whose reputation was built on violence and control. And now she was standing in his home, wearing clothes he'd provided, protected by security. She couldn't see, but knew was there. The shower ran hot enough to turn her skin pink. Lena stood under the water for 20 minutes, letting it wash away the Whitmore estate, the accusations, the weight of strangers' stares. When she finally emerged, wrapped in a towel that felt like it cost more than her weekly grocery budget, exhaustion hit her like a physical force. She climbed into bed wearing the provided clothes. Sleep should have been impossible, but her body had other ideas. Darkness took her under before she could fight it. But morning arrived with pale sunlight that turned the guest suite into something almost peaceful. Lena woke slowly, disoriented, her mind taking several seconds to remember where she was and why. The Moretti estate. Because Damien had... She sat up too quickly, her heart racing. The room spun briefly before settling. The bedside clock read 8:47 a.m. Later than she'd slept in months. Years, maybe. A soft knock on the door. "Come in," Lena called, her voice rough with sleep. Teresa entered carrying a tray. Coffee, toast, eggs prepared simply. Orange juice in a real glass, not plastic. "Good morning, Miss Vale. Mr. Moretti asked me to let you know he's in his office when you're ready. No rush." Lena accepted the tray, still processing the surreal normalcy of it all. "Thank you." Teresa left as quietly as she'd arrived. Lena ate slowly, her mind working through the implications of last night. She'd lost her job. That much was certain. The hospitality agency wouldn't keep her on after what happened at the Whitmore estate, regardless of whether she was innocent. Rich clients didn't want drama. They wanted invisible staff who caused no problems. So she had no income. Rent was due in 2 weeks. And she was sitting in a guest suite owned by one of the most dangerous men in New York. Eating breakfast like this was normal. She needed to go home, needed to figure out her next move, needed to... "Stop running," she whispered to herself. Because that's what she was doing, running through options, calculating escape routes, looking for ways to disappear again. It's what she always did, what survival had taught her. But maybe running wasn't an option anymore. Lena showered again, quickly this time, and dressed in the clothes Teresa had provided. They fit perfectly. Of course they did. When Damien Moretti made arrangements, details mattered. She found her way downstairs by following the architecture. Every hallway led somewhere logical. Every turn made sense. The house was designed for functionality, not confusion. Voices drifted from an open doorway. Don't care what Judge Whitmore's people are saying. The message was delivered. They understand the situation now. Damien's voice, low, controlled, carrying authority that didn't need volume. And the staff member who made the initial accusation? Another voice, male, older. Fired, blacklisted. She'll never work another high-end event in this city. Seems harsh for repeating what she was told. Seems appropriate for participating in destroying someone's life. Silence followed. Lena stood frozen in the hallway, unsure whether to announce herself or retreat. But before she could decide, Damien appeared in the doorway. Lena, come in. His office matched the rest of the house. Functional, minimal, expensive in ways that didn't announce themselves. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the gardens. A massive desk held multiple computer monitors. Two men sat in leather chairs facing the desk, one in his 60s with gray hair and a tailored suit. The other younger, maybe early 40s, built like he spent serious time in a gym. This is Robert Castellano, Damien gestured to the older man. And Marcus Chen. Marcus nodded. Robert studied her with the kind of attention that felt clinical. Gentlemen, give us the room, Damien said. They left without question. Damien gestured toward one of the vacated chairs. Sit. Lena sat. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Damien stood near the windows, hands in his pockets, silhouetted against morning light. From this angle, he looked almost ordinary, just a man in expensive casual clothes, thinking about something that weighed on him. Then he turned, and the illusion shattered. How much do you know about me? He asked. The question caught her off guard. I know your name. I know your reputation. Which is? That you're dangerous, that you control things that shouldn't be controlled, that people are afraid of you. Damien nodded slowly. And yet you called me last night. I had no one else. There's always someone else. Police, lawyers, social services. But you didn't call them. You called me. Why? Lena's throat tightened. Because they wouldn't have come. The honesty of it sat between them like something physical. You're right, Damien said quietly. They wouldn't have. The system you're supposed to trust, it doesn't work for people like you. It's designed to protect people like the Whitmores. Rich, connected, powerful enough to rewrite reality when it's inconvenient. So you rewrote it instead. Yes. And now they'll come after me to get to you. Damien moved closer, sitting on the edge of his desk rather than behind it. Less intimidating, more direct. They'll try. They won't succeed. How can you be sure? Because I've spent 15 years making sure that people who threaten what's mine face consequences severe enough to deter everyone else from trying. The possessive language should have frightened her. Maybe it did. But underneath the fear was something else, something that felt dangerously close to relief. I'm not yours, Lena said softly. Damien's expression didn't change. You called me. You asked for help. I came. That creates an obligation whether you like it or not. I didn't ask to be an obligation. No, you asked for protection. Same thing. Lena stood up, needing to move, needing to do something other than sit still while her life was redefined around her. I need to go home. I need to figure out my rent, find another job, deal with... Your apartment is being watched, Damien interrupted. 2 men, probably hired by someone connected to the Whitmores. They've been there since 4 a.m. Ice flooded Lena's veins. How do you know that? Because I have people watching your apartment too. The casual admission hit her like a slap. You had people watching my apartment? For how long? 3 years. The room tilted slightly. 3 years. Since he'd cleared her father's debt, since he'd given her his number, since she'd tried to disappear back into her invisible life. Why? Lena whispered. Damien stood up from the desk. Because your father's debt wasn't the only business I had that night. There was a complication, a loose end that needed handling. You were there, you saw things, Most people in your position either try to leverage what they know or become liabilities that need removing. But I didn't. No, you didn't. You went back to your life and never spoke about it, never tried to use it. That made you interesting and potentially useful. The cold calculation behind his words made her stomach turn. So you've been watching me, making sure I stayed quiet, making sure you stayed safe. That's not the same thing. In my world, it is. Lena wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite the morning sunlight filling the room. I want to leave. Where would you go? Your apartment is compromised. You have no job, no income. The hospitality agency has already dropped you. I confirmed that an hour ago. You're blacklisted from every major catering service in the tri-state area. Each word landed like a physical blow. That's not fair. No, Damien agreed. It's not. But it's reality. The Whitmores made sure you'd pay a price for embarrassing them. I can undo most of it, but it takes time. Why would you? Because you're under my protection now. That means something. To who? You? To everyone. Lena wanted to scream, wanted to run, wanted to rewind time to last night and make different choices. But none of that would change where she was standing right now. What do you want from me? She asked, her voice breaking slightly. Damien looked at her for a long moment. I want you to stop running. Stay here. Let me handle the Whitmores and their people. Let me fix the damage they caused. And then what? Then you go back to your life. Just like that? Just like that? Lena laughed, a bitter, exhausted sound. You're lying. Nobody does this for nothing. You want something. Everyone wants something. Damien's expression darkened slightly. You're right. I want something. What? Loyalty. The single word hung in the air like a threat, and a promise rolled together. You want me to work for you, Lena said flatly. No. I want you to trust that when I say you're protected, I mean it. And if I need something from you in the future, information, assistance, a favor, you don't hesitate. That sounds like working for you. It's survival. The same thing you've been doing for years, except now you have backing. Lena turned away from him, staring out the windows at gardens that looked peaceful and probably cost more to maintain than she made in a year. Everything Damien said made a horrible kind of sense. She had no job, no safety, no options, except this one. How long? She asked without turning around. How long what? How long do I stay here? 2 weeks, maybe 3, however long it takes to make the situation clear. And if I refuse? Damien's reflection appeared in the window glass as he moved closer, not crowding her, but present. Then I'll make sure you get home safely. I'll pay your rent for 6 months, set you up with a new job somewhere quiet, and you'll spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder wondering when the Whitmores people finally catch up to you. The brutal honesty of it cut deeper than any threat. That's not really a choice, Lena whispered. No, Damien said quietly. It's not. She closed her eyes against the reflection in the glass. Against the truth she didn't want to accept. Against the reality that running had finally stopped being an option. Okay, she said. 2 weeks. Good. Damien stepped back, giving her space. Teresa will show you around. The estate is yours to move through freely. I have business to handle today, but I'll be back tonight. He headed toward the door, then paused. Lena, I know this isn't what you wanted, but you're safer here than anywhere else right now. Try to remember that. Then he left. Lena stood alone in the office, staring out at gardens that suddenly felt less like paradise and more like a very expensive cage. The next 3 days passed in a strange limbo. Lena explored the estate carefully, mapping its dimensions like someone planning an escape route she knew she'd never use. The main house was massive, 8 bedrooms, multiple offices, a full gym, a library that made her chest ache with how many books lined its walls. Teresa ran the household with quiet efficiency. There was also Miguel, who handled security, Sophia, who managed the gardens, a rotating cast of staff who moved through the estate performing invisible maintenance. They all treated Lena with careful respect. Not warm, not cold, just professional. Like she was someone important, whose status they didn't fully understand yet. Damien himself was mostly absent. He left early each morning and returned late at night. Sometimes Lena would hear his voice drifting from his office, Low conversations that sounded like business, but felt like threats wrapped in civility. Once, she'd walked past his office around midnight and heard him say, "I don't care about their timeline. They had their chance to apologize properly. Now they wait until I'm ready to accept it." A pause. Because fear is more useful than forgiveness. Lena had kept walking. On the fourth day, things changed. She was reading in the library, an actual book, not her phone, something she hadn't done in months. When the front door opened with more force than necessary, voices erupted immediately. Completely unreasonable. You can't just, "I can. I did. It's done." Damien's voice sharp with irritation. "The judge is threatening legal action, harassment, intimidation. He's building a case. Let him build. I'll bury him with it." Lena set down her book and moved quietly toward the entrance hall. From the library doorway, she could see Damien standing near the front entrance with Marcus Chen. Damien's coat was damp, raining again, and his expression was the coldest she'd seen it. "You're making this personal," Marcus said carefully. "That's dangerous." It was already personal the moment they targeted her. "She's a hospitality worker you barely know. She's under my protection. That's all that matters." Marcus noticed Lena before Damien did. His expression shifted slightly, calculation moving behind his eyes. "Miss Vale, good afternoon." Damien turned. For a moment, something complicated moved across his face. Irritation at being overheard, followed by resignation, followed by something she couldn't identify. "We'll continue this later," Damien told Marcus. Marcus nodded and left through a side entrance. Silence filled the entrance hall. "I didn't mean to interrupt," Lena said. "You didn't interrupt anything important." It sounded important. Damien pulled off his coat and hung it carefully. "The Whitmores are making noise about last week. They want to claim I'm harassing them." "Are you?" "Yes." The blunt admission startled her into something close to laughter. "At least you're honest about it." "Lying would be insulting." Damien moved toward the kitchen. "Have you eaten?" "Teresa brought lunch earlier." "That's not what I asked." Lena followed him into the kitchen, a massive space designed for serious cooking, though she'd never seen Damien use it. He opened the refrigerator and pulled out ingredients without apparent thought. Bread, cheese, some kind of cold cuts. "You cook?" Lena asked. "I make sandwiches." "There's a difference." He assembled 2 sandwiches with the same precision he seemed to apply to everything. Efficient movements, no wasted effort, everything exactly where it needed to be. "Sit," he said, sliding a plate across the kitchen island toward her. Lena sat on one of the bar stools. Damien took the seat across from her, close enough that the kitchen island felt less like a barrier and more like neutral ground. They ate in silence for a moment. "How much longer?" Lena finally asked. "Until?" "Until this is resolved. Until I can go home." Damien set down his sandwich. "The Whitmores have more resources than I initially calculated. Judge Whitmore has connections in the DA's office. They're trying to build a harassment case against me, which complicates timeline. Because of me. Because they made a mistake and refused to accept consequences." "Same thing." "No, it's not." Damien looked at her directly. "You did nothing wrong. You called for help when you needed it. Everything that happened after that was my choice, not yours. But I'm still here, still stuck, still protected." The word landed between them like something heavy. Lena pushed her plate away, suddenly not hungry anymore. "I hate this. I hate feeling useless. I hate sitting in this beautiful house doing nothing while you—" She stopped, unsure how to finish that sentence. "While I what?" "While you destroy people's lives over me." Damien's expression hardened. "I'm destroying people's lives because they chose to target someone under my protection. The over you part is irrelevant. It's not irrelevant to me. Then that's something you need to work through. Because this is how my world operates. Actions have consequences. They chose to harm you. I chose to respond. Now they're learning what that means." Lena stood up abruptly, the bar stool scraping against tile. "I didn't ask for this. You called me. I called for help, not for you to start a war. There's no difference." The words echoed through the kitchen. Damien stood up too, his composure cracking slightly. "You think I enjoy this? You think I want to spend weeks dismantling a judge's career and his wife's social standing? I have actual business to run. Real problems that need solving. But I can't do any of that until this situation is resolved, because if I let them get away with targeting you, every other ambitious idiot in this city will think they can do the same. So this is about your reputation. This is about survival, mine and yours. Damien's voice had risen, not to shouting, but closer than she'd ever heard. You can hate it. You can hate me, but you don't get to pretend this isn't necessary. Tears burned behind Lena's eyes, but she refused to let them fall. I just want my life back. Your life was working yourself to death for people who treated you like furniture, struggling to make rent, hoping nobody noticed you long enough to hurt you. That's not a life. That's just slow motion drowning. It was mine. Damien stared at her for a long moment. Then something in his expression softened. Not much, but enough to notice. I know. The understanding in those two words broke something loose in her chest. Lena turned away before the tears could actually fall. I need to be alone. She left the kitchen before Damien could respond, heading back to the guest suite where she could fall apart in privacy. Behind her, she heard him exhale slowly, a sound that carried more weight than words. That night, Lena couldn't sleep. She lay in the massive bed staring at the ceiling while her mind spiraled through every choice she'd made that led here. Calling Damien, accepting his help, staying at his estate. Every decision had felt like survival in the moment, but now they felt like chains wrapping tighter with each passing day. Around 2 a.m., she gave up on sleep and went downstairs. The house was quiet, but not empty. She could feel security presence even if she couldn't see it. She found her way to the library and turned on a single lamp, casting warm light across rows of books that probably hadn't been read in years. She was pulling a random title from the shelf when she heard footsteps behind her. Damien stood in the doorway wearing dark pants and a t-shirt, looking more human than she'd ever seen him. His hair was disheveled like he'd been running his hands through it. He held 2 glasses of amber liquid. Bourbon, he said, offering one. Or whiskey. I forget which bottle I grabbed. Lena took it because refusing seemed pointless. The alcohol burned going down. Good burn. Expensive burn. Damien sat in one of the leather chairs, gesturing for her to take the other. For a moment, they sat in silence. I'm sorry, he said finally. Lena looked at him. For what? For making you feel trapped. That wasn't my intention. What was your intention? Damien stared into his glass. When you called me that night, I was in the middle of a meeting. 8 men who controlled different pieces of this city's underground. We'd been negotiating for 2 hours about territory and money and power. The usual business. He paused, taking a drink. The second I heard your voice, everything else became irrelevant. I stood up and left without explanation. Marcus told me later that half those men thought I was going to kill someone. The other half thought someone had died. None of them expected me to be rescuing a hospitality worker from a rich woman's tantrum. But you did. Yes. Why? Damien finally looked at her. 3 years ago, when I cleared your father's debt, you looked at me like I was something terrifying but necessary, like medicine that tasted horrible but kept you alive. Most people look at me with fear or greed or calculation. You looked at me with resignation, like you'd already accepted that survival meant dealing with people like me. He set down his glass. That stayed with me. So I watched you from a distance, made sure you were safe, made sure your father's other debts didn't find you. And I told myself it was just smart business, keeping track of potential assets. But when you called me that night, I realized it was never about business. Then what was it about? Recognition. You understand how this world actually works. You don't pretend the system is fair or that good people are rewarded or that asking for help makes you weak. You just survive, whatever it takes. And that, Damien's expression turned complicated. That's rare. Lena's throat tightened. So I'm what? A project? Someone you find interesting? You're someone I respect, which means you're someone I protect. I don't need protection. Yes, you do, and you're smart enough to know it, which is why you called me instead of pretending you could handle the Whitmores alone. The truth of it sat between them like something solid. Lena took another drink, letting the burn ground her. This can't last forever. Eventually I have to go back to real life. Your real life nearly destroyed you last week. Better than whatever this is. Is it? The question hung in the air unanswered. They sat in the library drinking expensive alcohol and not solving anything until the bottle was mostly empty and dawn started creeping through the windows. You should sleep, Damien said eventually. So should you. I'll get there. Lena stood up slowly, the alcohol making her slightly unsteady. She made it to the library door before turning back. Damien, when this is over, when the Whitmores back off and I can leave, what happens to us? He looked at her with an expression she couldn't read. Nothing. You go back to your life. I go back to mine. Just like that? Just like that. Lena nodded slowly. You're lying. Damien's mouth twitched, not quite a smile, but close. Probably. She left before either of them could say anything else that mattered. The next morning brought consequences neither of them expected. Lena woke to raised voices downstairs. She pulled on clothes quickly and headed toward the sound. Damien's office. The door was closed, but not soundproof. Completely out of control. The DA is threatening RICO charges. Do you understand what that means? Marcus's voice, louder than she'd ever heard it. Empty threats. They have no evidence. They don't need evidence. They need optics. And right now the optics are that you've been systematically destroying a federal judge and his family over a stolen bracelet that was never actually stolen. I've been protecting someone under my care. She's nobody, a hospitality worker who... The door flew open with enough force to crack against the wall. Damien stood in the doorway, his expression absolutely lethal. Finish that sentence. I dare you. Marcus appeared behind him, his face flushed. You need to hear this. You're making decisions based on what? Emotions, attachments, things that get people in our position killed. Damien turned to face him fully. Get out. Damien, get out. Marcus left, brushing past Lena in the hallway without acknowledgement. Silence fell like something physical. Damien saw Lena standing there. His expression shifted, anger draining away into something closer to exhaustion. How much did you hear? Enough. He gestured her into the office. She went because refusing felt more dangerous. Sit down, Damien said. I'd rather stand. Lena, please. The quiet request carried more weight than any demand. She sat. Damien moved to the windows, his back to her. For a moment, he just stood there, silhouetted against morning light. Marcus is right, he said quietly. The situation has gotten out of control. The DA is building a case. The Whitmores have more support than I anticipated. Staying here has become dangerous for you. Lena's stomach dropped. What are you saying? I'm saying I need to send you somewhere else, somewhere they can't find you until this resolves. You're sending me away. I'm keeping you safe by hiding me. Damien turned to face her. By making sure the Whitmores can't use you as leverage against me. Because that's where this is heading. They can't touch me directly, so they'll come after you. And I can't... He stopped, jaw tightening. I can't protect you and handle them at the same time. So you're choosing to handle them. I'm choosing to end this, permanently, which requires options I don't have while you're here. Understanding crashed over Lena like cold water. You're going to hurt them. Damien didn't answer, which was answer enough. No, Lena said, standing up. I won't let you do that. I won't be the excuse you use to... You're not an excuse. You're a liability. And I don't mean that as an insult. I mean that every decision I make right now is filtered through keeping you safe, and that's weakening my position. Then let me leave. Let me go back to my apartment and figure out... They're watching your apartment. They're watching your friends, both of them. They've contacted your landlord asking about you. You don't have anywhere safe to go except where I send you. Lena felt the cage closing tighter. When? Tonight. My people will drive you to a property I own upstate. Small town. Quiet. You'll stay there until this is finished. And if I refuse? Damien's expression turned absolutely cold. Then I'll have you taken anyway, because this isn't a negotiation anymore. The threat landed like a physical blow, but underneath the fear was something else, something that felt dangerously close to betrayal. You promised me 2 weeks, Lena whispered. You promised I'd be safe here. You're not safe anywhere near me right now. Don't you understand that? The closer you are to me, the more danger you're in. Then why did you bring me here in the first place? Because I thought I could protect you. I thought my reputation alone would be enough to make them back off. I was wrong. The admission seemed to cost him something. Lena wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold. So you're sending me away. To some town I don't know, away from everything, until you decide it's safe. Yes, that's not protection. That's imprisonment. It's survival, Damien said flatly. And right now, that's all I can offer you. Lena laughed, a broken, bitter sound. I should have never called you. Something flickered across Damien's face that looked almost like pain. Probably not. I want to leave, today, right now. That's not safe. I don't care. I'd rather take my chances with the Whitmores than spend one more second being your problem. You're not my problem. Damien's voice cracked slightly. He stopped. The unfinished sentence hung between them like something alive. I'm what? Lena demanded. Damien stared at her for a long moment, his expression caught between anger and something that looked dangerously vulnerable. Then his phone rang. He answered it without breaking eye contact with Lena. What? A pause. When? Another pause. Damien's expression went absolutely cold. I'll be right there. He ended the call. What happened? Lena asked. The Whitmores just filed a restraining order against me, claiming I've been stalking them, threatening them, destroying their reputations without cause. He grabbed his coat. Which means I have about 2 hours before federal marshals show up here to serve papers and search the property for evidence. Evidence of what? Damien looked at her with an expression that made her blood freeze. Evidence that I've been holding you here against your will. The world tilted. That's insane. I came here willingly. I stayed because I told you it wasn't safe to leave. Because my people are watching your apartment. Because I've been controlling every aspect of your life for the past week. Damien moved toward her. From the outside, this looks exactly like kidnapping, and Judge Whitmore knows it. Then I'll tell them the truth. I'll explain. You'll be questioned separately, by people trained to find coercion, in a system designed to believe powerful men are guilty until proven innocent when it's convenient. His hands landed gently on her shoulders. Lena, if they take me in for questioning, if this becomes a legal battle, you become the key witness, which means you become the primary target. So what do we do? Damien's expression was the most serious she'd ever seen it. You leave. Right now. Before anyone shows up. Before this gets worse. Leave where? Anywhere that isn't here. They're watching my apartment. I know, which is why you're going somewhere else. He pulled out his phone and made a call. Victor, change of plans. I need extraction ready in 10 minutes. Full protocol. He hung up and looked at Lena. Pack anything you want to take. You have 5 minutes. Damien, 5 minutes. Then we run. The absolute certainty in his voice made argument impossible. Lena ran upstairs, her heart hammering. She grabbed the few personal items she had. Her phone, her wallet, the clothes Teresa had provided. Everything fit in a small bag that felt pathetically inadequate for whatever came next. When she came back downstairs, Damien was waiting near the front entrance. He'd changed into darker clothes, tactical, practical. 3 SUVs sat in the circular driveway with engines running. Where are we going? Lena asked. Damien took her bag and handed it to one of his security team. Somewhere they won't think to look. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have right now. He guided her toward the center vehicle. The door closed behind them with a heavy, final sound. As the SUVs pulled away from the Moretti estate, Lena looked back through the rear window. The house that had been her cage for a week disappeared behind trees and iron gates. Beside her, Damien sat perfectly still, his expression unreadable. I'm sorry, he said quietly. For what? For making you believe you could ever go back to your old life. The truth of it hit her like cold water, because somewhere between the phone call and this moment, between protection and possession, between safety and survival, the possibility of returning to invisibility had disappeared completely, and neither of them knew what came next. The SUVs moved through early morning traffic like predators hunting in formation. Lena sat pressed against the leather seat, her bag clutched in her lap, watching the city blur past through tinted windows that made everything look darker than it was. Damien sat beside her in absolute silence, not the comfortable kind, the kind that felt like pressure building before an explosion. His phone buzzed constantly, texts, calls, notifications that he ignored with deliberate focus. Whatever was happening behind them at the estate, Whatever consequences were mounting, he'd made a choice to prioritize this moment over everything else. That should have felt reassuring. Instead, it felt terrifying. "Where are we going?" Lena asked again. Damien didn't look at her. "Somewhere safe." "You keep saying that." "Because it's true." "Safe for how long? A day? A week? Forever?" Finally, he turned toward her. His expression carried exhaustion she hadn't seen before, the kind that lived in someone's bones and couldn't be hidden anymore. "I don't know." The admission landed heavier than any lie would have. "You always know," Lena said. "You always have a plan. That's who you are." "Not this time." The vehicles took an exit off the main highway, heading toward industrial areas where warehouses stretched like metal skeletons against gray sky. Rain had started again. Not heavy, just persistent. The kind that made everything look washed out and tired. They pulled into a storage facility surrounded by chain-link fencing. The gate opened automatically. Inside, rows of identical units created a maze of corrugated steel and padlocked doors. The SUV stopped near a unit at the far end. Victor emerged from the lead vehicle, his expression grimmer than usual. "Status?" Damien asked as he stepped out. "Federal marshals arrived at the estate 6 minutes ago. They have a warrant. Teresa is handling it, but they're going through everything." "How long do we have?" "Before they realize you're not there. Maybe an hour. Before they issue a warrant for your arrest. 3 hours if we're lucky." Damien nodded slowly, processing information with the same cold efficiency Lena had seen him apply to everything. "And the alternate location?" "Ready. But Damien—" Victor glanced at Lena, then back. "Are you sure about this?" "No." The honesty of it hung in the damp air. Victor opened the storage unit. Inside was nothing like Lena expected. Not empty space, but a fully equipped safe room. Computers. Communications equipment. Weapons stored in locked cases. Supplies stacked neatly against walls. "How many of these do you have?" Lena asked. "Enough," Damien said, moving past her into the unit. The space was maybe 15 by 20 feet, larger than some apartments Lena had lived in, but still claustrophobic. A single overhead light cast harsh shadows. No windows. One entrance. It felt exactly like what it was. A place designed for hiding when everything else failed. "You're leaving me here," Lena said flatly. Damien turned to face her. "No, we're both staying here, for now." "For how long?" "Until I figure out the next move." Victor cleared his throat. "The marshals will check known properties. This location isn't registered to you directly, but they'll find it eventually. You have maybe 12 hours. "Then we use 12 hours. Damien's tone left no room for argument. "Keep me updated. And Victor, no one knows where we are. Not Marcus. Not Robert. No one." Victor's expression flickered with something that looked like concern. "You don't trust them?" "I don't trust anyone right now." Victor nodded and left, closing the storage unit door behind him. The sound of it locking from outside echoed like a cell door slamming shut. Silence pressed down on them. Lena set her bag on the floor and looked around the safe room. Everything was functional, efficient, designed for survival rather than comfort. A cot in one corner, a small table with 2 chairs, a mini fridge, a bathroom barely large enough to qualify as one. "This is insane," she whispered. Damien was already moving toward the communications equipment, powering up computers and checking connections. "Insane would be staying at the estate and letting them arrest me. They're federal marshals. You can't just run from them." "I'm not running. I'm buying time." "For what?" "To figure out who set this up." Lena stared at him. "What are you talking about?" Damien's fingers flew across a keyboard, pulling up files and documents that made no sense to her. The restraining order, the timing, the fact that the Whitmores suddenly have enough evidence to justify a federal warrant. He paused, his jaw tightening. Someone gave them that evidence. Someone who knows how I operate. Someone close enough to my organization to provide details that would convince a judge I'm a threat. "You think someone in your organization is working against you?" "I know they are. I just don't know who yet." The cold certainty in his voice made her skin crawl. This wasn't paranoia. This was calculation based on experience with betrayal. Lena sat down in one of the chairs, her legs suddenly unsteady. "So what do we do?" You stay quiet. I work. Damien didn't look away from the screens. There's food in the fridge, water, everything you need. Just don't leave this room. I wasn't planning to. Hours crawled past while Damien worked in focused silence. Lena tried to read on her phone but couldn't concentrate. Tried to eat but had no appetite. Tried to sleep on the cot, but her mind kept spiraling through worst-case scenarios that all ended the same way. Arrested, alone, destroyed. Around noon, Damien's phone buzzed with a call. He answered immediately. Talk to me. Lena watched his expression shift from concentration to something colder. When? A pause. Show me. He turned one of the computer monitors toward himself, and whatever he saw there made his jaw tighten dangerously. Send me everything, now! He ended the call and stared at the screen with an expression that made Lena's stomach twist. What happened? She asked. Damien didn't answer immediately. His hands moved across the keyboard, pulling up files, documents, images that he studied with the intensity of someone looking for a specific lie hidden in truth. Then he went absolutely still. No, he said quietly. Damien, what is it? He turned the monitor toward her. Security footage. Time-stamped from a week ago. The night of the Whitmore Gala. The image showed a hallway in the estate, and there, moving through frame, was Lena, walking into Mrs. Whitmore's sitting room, spending 3 minutes inside, leaving with something small clutched in her hand. The world tilted sideways. That's not possible, Lena whispered. I never went in there. I told you. I used the restroom and left. That footage is fake. It has to be. Damien's expression was unreadable. The metadata says it's authentic, unedited, original file from the estate's security system. Then someone altered it before it was saved. Someone planted... Who? Damien turns to face her fully. Who had access to the estate's security system? Who knew which cameras covered which hallways? Who could edit footage seamlessly enough that forensic analysis shows no tampering? I don't know, but I didn't take that bracelet. The footage shows you did. The footage is lying. Damien stood up slowly. Or you are. The accusation hit like a physical blow. Lena stood up too, her whole body shaking. You don't believe me. I believe evidence. Then you're an idiot, because someone is setting me up, setting us both up. Why would anyone set you up? You're nobody. A hospitality worker with no connections, no power, no reason for anyone to notice you. Damien's voice stayed level, but something dangerous moved underneath. Unless there's something you're not telling me. There's nothing, I swear. Then explain the footage. I can't, but I know I didn't do it. Damien's phone buzzed again. He glanced at it, and whatever he read there made his expression go completely cold. What? Lena demanded. They found the bracelet. Hope flared in her chest. Where? In your apartment, hidden in your bedroom closet, behind a loose panel that someone tipped them off about. The hope died immediately. No, that's impossible. I've never had that bracelet. Someone planted it there. Don't you see? Someone is framing me. Why? What's the end game? You're worthless as leverage. You have nothing anyone wants. The words cut deeper than he probably intended. Lena wrapped her arms around herself, trying to hold together pieces that were rapidly falling apart. I don't know why, but I'm telling you the truth. I didn't steal anything. I didn't take that bracelet. Damien studied her for a long moment. His expression was the coldest she'd ever seen, the face of someone making calculations about whether she was worth keeping alive or just another problem that needed permanent solving. Convince me, he said quietly. How? How do I prove something I didn't do? You can't. That's the problem. Lena's vision blurred with tears she refused to let fall. So that's it? You're just going to believe some footage and a planted bracelet over everything that's happened between us? What's happened between us? Damien asked. I rescued you from a bad situation. You stayed at my home. I protected you because you asked me to. But I don't actually know you, Lena. I don't know what you're capable of. I don't know what debts you might owe or what pressure someone might be putting on you. I don't owe anyone anything. Your father did. He owed a lot of people. Maybe one of them came collecting. The accusation made her stomach turn. My father's debts died with him. You cleared them. You said, I cleared what I knew about. There could be others. There aren't. Then explain the evidence. I can't. The admission hung between them like something poisonous. Damien's phone buzzed again. This time he answered it without looking away from Lena. What? His expression shifted as he listened. You're sure? A longer pause. Send me the file. He hung up and pulled up something on the computer. Lena watched his face carefully, trying to read what he was seeing. Whatever it was made him go absolutely still. Damien? He turned the monitor toward her again. Bank records. Her bank records. Showing a deposit of $50,000 3 days before the Whitmore Gala. Wire transfer from an offshore account. And another transfer, this one for $25,000, sent out 2 days after the gala to an account registered in her name. I've never seen these before, Lena said, her voice breaking. I don't have offshore accounts. I barely have enough in checking to cover rent. This isn't real. The bank confirms the transactions are legitimate. Then someone hacked my account, created fake records. Don't you see what's happening? Someone is building a case against me to destroy you. Or you're exactly what you appear to be, a thief who got caught and is now lying to save herself. The words landed like bullets. Lena backed away from him, her heart hammering. You really believe that? After everything? Damien's expression was stone. I believe evidence, and the evidence says you stole a bracelet, sold it, and deposited the money. When you got caught, you called me for protection, and I was stupid enough to provide it. That's not what happened. Then what did happen, Lena? Tell me a story that makes sense. I don't have one, because none of this makes sense. But I know, I didn't do any of this. Damien's phone buzzed again. He ignored it. Here's what I think happened, he said quietly. I think you saw an opportunity at the Whitmore estate. Rich people, expensive jewelry, easy target. You took the bracelet thinking no one would notice or blame you, but they did notice. They did blame you, so you called the one person you knew could make it go away. No. You manipulated me, used my protection, stayed in my home while the heat died down, and the whole time you were planning to disappear with the money once things settled. That's insane, is it? Because from where I'm standing, it's the only explanation that fits all the evidence. Tears were falling now despite Lena's best efforts. You're wrong. You're wrong about all of it. Am I? Damien moved closer, not threatening, but intense. Then tell me who's setting you up. Tell me who has the resources, the access, the motivation to create this elaborate frame job. Give me a name, Lena. Give me something. I don't know. Then you're useless to me. The finality in his voice made her blood freeze. What does that mean? She whispered. Damien turned away from her, his hands gripping the edge of the table hard enough that his knuckles went white. For a long moment, he just stood there, breathing carefully like someone fighting for control. It means I made a mistake, he said finally. I let emotion cloud judgment. I protected someone I shouldn't have. And now I'm sitting in a storage unit hiding from federal marshals because I was stupid enough to believe. He stopped, jaw clenching. It doesn't matter what I believed. Damien, please, you have to listen to me. I'm done listening. He pulled out his phone and made a call. Victor, I need extraction. One person, full containment protocol. Lena's stomach dropped. What are you doing? Damien didn't answer her. 30 minutes, and Victor, she's a flight risk. Take precautions. He ended the call. You're handing me over, Lena said, her voice hollow. To who? The marshals? To people who will make sure you don't cause more damage. What does that mean? It means you disappear. Quietly. Permanently. No body, no evidence, no connections back to me. The room spun. This wasn't protection. This was execution. You're going to kill me, Lena whispered. Damien finally looked at her. His expression was absolutely empty. I'm going to do what I should have done a week ago, eliminate a problem before it destroys everything I've built. I'm not a problem. I'm a person. I called you for help. You called me to cover your crimes. No. Yes. Damien moved toward the door, and I was fool enough to believe otherwise. He opened it just enough to step out, then paused. For what it's worth, I'm sorry it ended this way. But you made your choices. Now you live with the consequences. Damien, please. The door closed. The lock engaged from outside. Lena stood alone in the safe room that had become a tomb, her whole body shaking with terror and rage and desperate helplessness. This couldn't be happening. This wasn't real. But the locked door, and the evidence stacked against her, and the 30-minute countdown until someone arrived to make her disappear, permanently said otherwise. She had to think, had to find a way out, had to... Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. The computer. Check the hidden partition. Password. Invisible. Lena stared at the message, her heart hammering. It could be a trap. Could be whoever was framing her finishing the job. Could be nothing. But she had no other options. She moved to the computer Damien had been using and started searching through file systems. It took 10 minutes to find the hidden partition, encrypted, protected, buried beneath layers of security that should have been impenetrable. She entered the password. The partition opened. Inside were files, dozens of them. Documents, emails, transaction records, surveillance footage. Lena started reading, and with each file her understanding of the situation shattered and reformed into something infinitely worse. The first document was a contract dated 6 months ago, between Damien Moretti and Judge Howard Whitmore, an agreement to funnel money through the judge's charitable foundation in exchange for legal protection and favorable rulings. The second document showed that arrangement falling apart 3 months ago when the judge tried to renegotiate terms. The third document was an email from Damien to someone identified only as V with instructions to create leverage against the Whitmores. The fourth document was a detailed plan. Plant a thief at the next Whitmore event. Someone disposable. Someone with a connection to Damien that could be revealed at the right moment. Use her to create a scandal that would destroy the Whitmores' reputation while giving Damien plausible deniability. The fifth document was her background check. Lena Vale. Father died owing debts. Struggling financially. Perfect target. Will jump at any rescue offered. The sixth document was footage from 3 weeks ago. Surveillance of Lena working a different event. Damien studying her from across the room, making the decision that she was the one. The seventh document was the plan's execution timeline. Have someone steal Mrs. Whitmore's bracelet during the gala. Make sure Lena is in the wrong place at the right time. Edit security footage to implicate her. Step in to rescue her when she calls for help, which she will, because she has no one else. Keep her close. Control her movements. Build a relationship that looks protective, but is actually containment. Wait for the Whitmores to retaliate. Use their retaliation as justification to destroy them completely. Then eliminate Lena before she realizes she was the weapon all along. The room spun. Lena couldn't breathe, couldn't process, couldn't understand. Everything. The gala, the accusation, the rescue, the protection, the growing trust between them. All of it had been manufactured. Damien hadn't saved her. He'd created her as a problem to solve. She was never a person he respected. She was a tool, a weapon, a sacrifice he'd been planning from the beginning. The door lock clicked. Lena's head snapped toward the sound, her heart exploding into panicked rhythm. The door opened slowly. But it wasn't Victor who stepped inside. It was Marcus Chen. He looked at her with an expression that carried something close to pity. You found the files. Lena couldn't speak. Marcus closed the door behind him. I sent you that text. I figured you deserved to know the truth before... He gestured vaguely. Before whatever Damien has planned. Why? Lena finally managed. Why are you telling me this? Because I'm tired of cleaning up his mistakes. Marcus moved closer. Not threatening, just tired. Damien is brilliant, ruthless, effective, but he's also become reckless. This plan with you, it was unnecessary, cruel, and now it's spiraling into something that might destroy all of us. So you're here to kill me before it gets worse? No. Marcus pulled out a phone. I'm here to offer you a choice. What choice? Help me stop him, testify against him, give the feds everything they need to take him down. In exchange, I make sure you walk away clean. New identity, money, protection. Lena laughed, a broken, bitter sound. You want me to betray him? After he created me as a weapon to destroy someone else? I want you to survive. And right now, survival means choosing the winning side. Which is you. Which is the law. The marshals know Damien is guilty. They just need proof. You're that proof. You can confirm he manipulated this entire situation. That he framed you to frame the Whitmores, that everything he's done is part of a criminal conspiracy. And you get what out of this? Marcus's expression hardened slightly. I get to walk away from an organization that's become too dangerous to control, and I get immunity for providing the testimony that brings down New York's most wanted criminal. You're as bad as he is. Maybe, but I'm offering you life. He's offering you death. Choose carefully. Lena's mind raced through impossible options. Trust Marcus, who'd been part of Damien's organization this whole time. Refuse Marcus and wait for whoever Damien sent to end this permanently, or try to run and get maybe 10 feet before security cut her down. I need time to think, she said. You have 5 minutes. Then I make the call with or without your cooperation. Marcus stepped outside, leaving the door slightly ajar. A test, probably, to see if she'd run. Lena sat down hard, her legs finally giving out. Everything she'd believed about the past week was a lie. Every moment of feeling seen, feeling protected, feeling like she mattered, all carefully constructed manipulation. Damien had never cared about her. He'd created her as collateral damage, and now she had to choose between the man who'd manufactured her destruction and the man offering to save her in exchange for becoming the weapon one more time. Her phone buzzed. Another text from the unknown number. There's a third option, but it requires trusting someone you have every reason to hate. Check the bathroom. Behind the mirror. Move fast. Lena stood on shaking legs and moved to the tiny bathroom. She pulled the mirror away from the wall. Behind it was a gun, and a note in handwriting she recognized from documents she'd just read. Damien's handwriting. If you're reading this, Marcus found you first. Don't trust him. He's working with the Whitmores. Everything he just offered you is a trap. The gun has 1 magazine. Use it carefully. Get to the address below. I'll find you there. D. Beneath it was an address in Brooklyn. Lena stared at the note, at the gun, at the impossible choice now multiplied into something even more complex. Trust Damien, who'd admitted to planning her death. Trust Marcus, who was offering salvation in exchange for betrayal. Or trust neither, and try to survive on her own with a single gun and no understanding of who was actually hunting her. Outside, Marcus's voice called through the door. Time's up! What's your answer? Lena took the gun with trembling hands. Checked the magazine, 15 rounds. She had no idea how to use it properly, had never fired a weapon in her life. But survival had taught her one truth that applied to every impossible situation. Sometimes you don't choose the right path. You just choose the one that keeps you breathing long enough to figure out what right actually means. She tucked the gun into the waistband of her pants, covering it with her shirt. Then she opened the bathroom door and faced Marcus with an expression she forced into something resembling surrender. Okay, she said quietly. I'll help you. Tell me what you need. Marcus smiled. And in that smile, Lena saw exactly what Damien had meant about choosing the wrong allies in desperate times. But the gun pressed against her spine felt like the only honest thing left in a world built entirely on lies. And she would use it the second she understood who deserved the bullet more. Marcus smiled at her surrender, and Lena saw the trap closing even as she stepped into it. Smart choice, he said, pulling out his phone. The marshals will want to debrief you before we move forward. Standard procedure. They'll ask questions about Damien's operation, where he keeps records, who reports to him, how money moves through his network. I don't know any of that. You know more than you think. You've been living in his home, watching his patterns. People reveal themselves when they believe they're safe. Marcus gestured toward the door. We need to move. Damien will realize I'm not following his orders soon. Lena's hand drifted toward her back where the gun pressed against her spine, hidden beneath her shirt. Every instinct screamed at her to pull it now, to end this before Marcus could finish whatever betrayal he'd orchestrated. But Damien's note had said Marcus was working with the Whitmores, which meant Marcus had backup, which meant shooting him now would just bring more people running. She needed to understand the full picture before she made a move that couldn't be undone. Okay, Lena said quietly. Where are we going? Someplace neutral, a hotel in Midtown. The marshals are waiting there. Why not a federal building? Marcus's expression flickered with something that might have been annoyance. Because this situation is delicate. Damien has people everywhere, including inside law enforcement. We need to keep this quiet until we have enough to move against him publicly. Everything about that explanation felt wrong. Federal marshals didn't conduct operations out of hotels. They didn't hide from corrupt cops. They brought overwhelming force and legal authority because that's what made them federal marshals. But Lena nodded like she believed him. Lead the way. They left the storage unit together. Outside, a single black sedan waited. No SUVs, no security detail, just Marcus and a driver Lena didn't recognize. That alone should have been a red flag. Damien traveled with protection. His people traveled with protection. Nobody in his organization moved through the city alone. Lena climbed into the back seat. Marcus slid in beside her. The driver pulled out of the storage facility without a word. Rain had picked up again, turning the city into a blurred watercolor of gray buildings and wet streets. Traffic moved sluggishly through downtown Brooklyn, giving Lena time to think. The address Damien had written was in Brooklyn. They were heading toward Manhattan, away from where Damien said she should go, away from whatever third option he'd claimed existed. Marcus's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then typed a quick response. Lena caught a glimpse of the name at the top of the thread. Catherine. Catherine Whitmore. So Damien's note was right. Marcus was working with them, which meant everything he'd said about federal marshals and immunity deals was manufactured. There were no marshals waiting at a hotel. There was just whatever ending the Whitmores had paid Marcus to arrange. Lena's hand moved slowly toward the gun. Don't, Marcus said quietly, without looking at her. Lena froze. Marcus finally turned to face her, his expression calm but carrying an edge that hadn't been there before. You're not as subtle as you think. I saw you come out of the bathroom, saw the weight shift in how you moved. So let's skip the part where you pull a gun you don't know how to use and I have to take it away from you. You said you were helping me. I am. Just not the way you thought. Marcus gestured to the driver. Pull over. The sedan stopped on a quiet side street lined with warehouses. Empty. Industrial. The kind of place where noise disappeared into concrete and nobody asked questions. Lena's heart hammered against her ribs. Get out, Marcus said. No. Get out, or David shoots you in the car and we clean up the mess later. Your choice. The driver, David, had turned slightly in his seat, one hand resting on something Lena couldn't see but could imagine clearly enough. She opened the door and stepped out into rain that immediately soaked through her clothes. Marcus followed, keeping distance between them, his own hand now visibly holding a gun that looked professional and well-maintained. Here's the actual situation, Marcus said. The Whitmores paid me $2 million to deliver you to them. Alive. Conscious. Able to answer questions about Damien's organization before they decide what to do with you. I don't know anything about his organization. They think you do, and they're willing to invest considerable resources into finding out. Marcus gestured with the gun. Walk. That warehouse on the left. Lena didn't move. Damien will find out. He'll kill you for this. Damien is about to be arrested by actual federal marshals, not the fake ones I told you about. I made sure the evidence against him is airtight. By tomorrow morning, he'll be in custody facing RICO charges that will put him away for life. Marcus's smile was cold. He's not going to find out about anything because he's done. You planned this from the beginning. I planned for opportunities. The Whitmores provided one. You provided another. Damien's paranoia did the rest. Marcus stepped closer, rain streaming down his face. Now walk, or I put a bullet in your leg and drag you inside. Either way, you're going in that building. Lena's mind raced through options that all ended badly. Running meant getting shot. Fighting meant getting shot. Complying meant getting tortured for information she didn't have, then probably killed anyway. The gun pressed against her spine felt like the only advantage she had left. Okay, she said, turning toward the warehouse. She made it 3 steps before spinning back and pulling the gun in one desperate motion. Her hand shook so badly she almost dropped it. Marcus just looked at her with something close to pity. You've never fired a weapon before, have you? I'll figure it out. No, you won't. Marcus raised his own gun with practiced ease. Put it down, Lena. Last chance. Behind him, David had exited the sedan and was circling around to flank her position. 2 guns now. 2 professional killers. 1 terrified woman who'd never shot anything in her life. The math was brutal. Lena's finger touched the trigger. Then a new voice cut through the rain like a blade through flesh. Marcus. Everyone froze. Damian Moretti stepped out from behind a delivery truck parked 30 feet away, his own weapon trained directly on Marcus's head. He looked exactly like what he was, a man who'd built an empire on violence and had no hesitation about using it. "Drop it," Damian said quietly. Marcus's expression shifted from confidence to calculation. "You're supposed to be at the estate." "I was never at the estate. I was following you." Damian moved closer, his gun never wavering. "I knew someone in my organization was working against me. Took a while to confirm it was you, but when you volunteered for extraction duty, everything clicked into place. So you set me up. I gave you enough rope. You hanged yourself." David swung his weapon toward Damian, but another figure emerged from the opposite direction. Victor, also armed, his gun trained on David with professional precision. "Drop it," Victor repeated. David hesitated, then lowered his weapon slowly. Marcus still held his gun, still had it pointed in Lena's general direction. Not a direct threat, but close enough. "This doesn't change anything. The marshals still have their evidence. You're still finished." "The evidence you fabricated?" Damian's voice carried something dark and patient. "The fake transactions and edited footage and planted testimony? I know about all of it, Marcus. I've known for 3 days. I've been watching you build your case, feeding you information, letting you think you were winning." "That's impossible." "No, that's strategy." Damian gestured slightly with his gun. "Put it down, now." "Or what? You shoot me here in the street? There are cameras, witnesses. You're not that stupid." "You're right, I'm not." Damian's expression went absolutely cold. "Which is why I spent the last 3 days compiling evidence of your actual betrayal. Wire transfers from the Whitmores to your offshore accounts, emails between you and Judge Whitmore coordinating this frame job, testimony from 6 people in my organization who watched you sell me out piece by piece." Marcus's confidence finally cracked. "You're bluffing." "Victor, send the files." Victor pulled out a phone one-handed and typed something quickly. 5 seconds later, Marcus's phone buzzed in his pocket. "Check it," Damian said. Marcus pulled out his phone awkwardly, trying to keep his gun steady while reading. Lena watched his face go from confident to pale to something close to genuine fear. "That's enough to put you away for 20 years, Damian continued. "Conspiracy, racketeering, attempted murder, all documented, all verified, all ready to be handed to actual federal prosecutors who'd love to flip someone in my organization. You wouldn't turn me in. That exposes you. It exposes that someone in my organization betrayed me. It proves I'm willing to cooperate with law enforcement to remove corruption. It actually protects me." Damian took another step closer. "But I'm not going to turn you in, Marcus, because that's too clean, too quick. Then what? Then you disappear. The same way you plan to make Lena disappear. The same way you've made problems disappear for me over the past 8 years. Except this time, you're the problem." Marcus's hand tightened on his gun. Lena saw the calculation moving behind his eyes, the desperate math of someone realizing they had nothing left to lose. "Don't," she said quietly. Marcus looked at her. "You're defending him? After everything he did to you?" "I'm defending myself. If you pull that trigger, people die. Maybe me. Probably you. Possibly all of us. And I've decided I'm tired of being collateral damage in other people's wars." "Smart girl," Damian said without looking away from Marcus. Marcus laughed, a bitter, broken sound. "This is insane. All of this. Over what? A hospitality worker? A stolen bracelet? None of this matters." "It matters because I said it matters," Damian replied. "That's how power works, Marcus. You should remember that. You helped me build it." For a moment, nobody moved. Rain fell. Traffic noise echoed from distant streets. 4 people stood in a standoff that could only end one way. Then Marcus made his choice. He swung his gun toward Damian. Lena pulled her trigger without thinking. The recoil nearly knocked the gun from her hands. The sound was deafening. Her aim was terrible. The bullet hit the sedan's windshield instead of anything human, but it was enough to break Marcus's focus for 1 critical second. Damian fired twice. Both shots hit center mass. Marcus dropped. David tried to raise his weapon. Victor fired once. David fell. Silence crashed over the street like a physical force. Lena stood frozen, the gun still raised, her hands shaking so violently she couldn't keep the barrel steady. Smoke drifted from the muzzle. Rain washed blood toward the gutter in thin streams that looked black in the gray light. Damien moved to Marcus and checked for a pulse. His expression never changed. He's gone. Victor was already moving toward David. This one too. Call our people, standard cleanup. Make it look like a robbery gone wrong. Damien finally looked at Lena. Put the gun down. Lena couldn't move, couldn't process, couldn't reconcile the fact that she'd just fired a weapon at another human being, missed, but fired, and watched two people die in front of her. Lena, put it down! His voice cut through the shock. She lowered the gun slowly. Damien crossed the distance between them and took it from her numb fingers. You're okay, he said quietly. You're safe. I shot at him. I know. I tried to kill him. I know. I missed. Also know that. Damien checked the gun's magazine, then tucked it into his coat. But you tried. That's what matters. Lena's legs gave out. She sat down hard on the wet pavement, not caring about rain or blood or the two bodies cooling 20 feet away. Her whole body shook with adrenaline crash and delayed terror and the horrible understanding that she'd just crossed a line she could never uncross. Damien crouched beside her, not touching, just present. We need to move. Cleanup takes time, but this street won't stay empty forever. You knew, Lena whispered. You knew Marcus was going to betray you. You let him think he was winning. You set all of this up. Yes. The files on the computer, the evidence against you, that was bait. Yes. You wanted me to find them. You wanted me to believe you'd set me up from the beginning. I needed Marcus to believe you'd believe it. He was monitoring everything, the safe house, the computers, the communications. If I'd told you the truth, he would have known I was on to him. So you let me think you were going to kill me. Damien's jaw tightened slightly. Yes. You let me believe everything between us was manipulation. It was the only way to sell the deception. Lena looked up at him with eyes that burned from rain and tears and rage. How much of it was real? What? The protection, the concern, the way you looked at me like I mattered. How much of that was real and how much was just strategy? Damien stared at her for a long moment. Behind them, Victor was making phone calls in low tones, coordinating cleanup crews and disposal protocols. The rain kept falling, the bodies kept cooling. The city kept moving around them like none of this mattered. I don't know, Damien finally said. The honesty of it hit harder than any lie would have. I need to go, Lena said. I need to get away from you and this and everything. You can't, not yet. Watch me. She tried to stand. Damien caught her arm, not rough, just firm. The Whitmores are still out there. They paid Marcus $2 million to deliver you. That money's gone now. They're going to want answers about where it went and why you're still breathing. So what do I do? Hide in your safe house forever? No, we end this. Tonight. Lena pulled her arm free. How? By giving them what they wanted. Which is? Damien's expression went cold and calculating. The face of someone who'd spent years turning problems into opportunities and bodies into messages. A confession. Victor appeared beside them. Cleanup crew is 10 minutes out. We need to be gone in 5. Get the car, Damien told him. Then to Lena. Can you walk? I don't have a choice, do I? No. She stood on shaking legs and followed Damien to a different vehicle, a dark SUV that had appeared from somewhere during the chaos. She climbed in because standing still wasn't an option, and running would just get her killed by someone else's bullet instead of Marcus's. As they pulled away from the scene, Lena watched through the rear window as Victor and 2 other men started moving bodies with practiced efficiency. Like this was normal, like death was just another business transaction requiring proper accounting. Where are we going? She asked. The Whitmore estate. Lena's head snapped toward him. Are you insane? Probably. Damien pulled out his phone and started typing. But they want answers. We're going to give them answers they'll never forget. They'll kill us. They'll try. That's not reassuring. Damien finally looked at her directly. You wanted this to end. This is how it ends. Face to face, no more games, no more proxies. Just us and them and the truth. What truth? That they started a war they couldn't win, and now they're going to pay for it. The SUV cut through Manhattan traffic toward areas where buildings got larger and spaces got emptier. The kind of neighborhoods where wealth bought silence and privacy meant nobody asked about screaming. Lena's mind worked through scenarios that all ended in violence. What do you need me to do? Tell them the truth. That Marcus was working for them. That he planned to kill you after extracting information. That I stopped him. They won't believe that. They will when I show them the evidence. Wire transfers, emails, testimony from Marcus's people who are suddenly very cooperative. Damien's expression was stone. And they'll believe it because the alternative is admitting they hired someone who stole $2 million and got himself killed without delivering. So you're going to what? Walk in there and present evidence like this is a trial? No. I'm going to walk in there and tell them exactly what happened. And then I'm going to explain what happens if they ever come near you again. By threatening them? By promising them. The difference in wording felt important. They pulled up to the Whitmore estate 40 minutes later, the same mansion where this had all started. The same gates, the same security. But this time, Damien didn't sneak in through side entrances or rely on reputation to clear his path. He walked straight up to the front entrance and knocked. A security guard opened the door, young, professional, carrying a weapon that he didn't immediately draw but probably wanted to. Mr. Moretti, you're not welcome here. Tell Judge Whitmore I have information about his missing $2 million. He'll want to hear this. The guard hesitated, spoke into a radio, then stepped aside. They were led through familiar hallways toward a private study Lena hadn't seen during the gala. Judge Howard Whitmore sat behind a massive desk looking older and more tired than she remembered. Catherine Whitmore stood near the windows, her expression cold fury barely contained. You have exactly 2 minutes, Judge Whitmore said. Then I'm calling my security to remove you forcibly. Marcus Chen is dead, Damien stated flatly. He was working for you. He took your money. He attempted to kidnap and murder Lena Vale. He failed. Now you're out $2 million and you have exactly one chance to walk away from this without destroying what's left of your reputation. Silence filled the study. Catherine spoke first. You're insane. We never hired anyone named Marcus Chen. Damien pulled out his phone and started playing audio. Marcus's voice, clear and unmistakable. The Whitmores paid me $2 million to deliver you to them. Alive. Conscious. The color drained from Catherine's face. That proves nothing, Judge Whitmore said, but his voice had lost its authority. It proves you commissioned a kidnapping and murder, which is life in prison even for a federal judge. Damien pocketed his phone. But I'm willing to make this go away, because unlike you, I understand the value of strategic retreat. What do you want? Judge Whitmore asked quietly. An end. Complete and permanent. You stop investigating me. You stop targeting Lena. You destroy every piece of fabricated evidence you created. And you live with the knowledge that I could destroy you at any moment but choose not to. Why would you choose not to? Because destroyed enemies are useless. Terrified enemies can still be valuable. Damien's expression was absolutely cold. Think carefully about which one you'd rather be. Judge Whitmore and his wife exchanged glances that carried years of unspoken communication. Fine, the judge finally said. We'll back off. But if you ever come near us again— You'll what? Damien interrupted. Hire another mercenary? Frame another innocent person? Try to use law enforcement you don't actually control? He leaned forward slightly. You're done making threats. From now on, you live quietly, you keep your head down, and you pray I never change my mind about letting you keep breathing. Catherine moved toward her husband, her hands shaking with barely suppressed rage. You can't just— I can. I did. It's finished. Damien straightened. Come near Lena again, and there won't be evidence or trials or opportunities to negotiate. There will just be funerals, understand? Judge Whitmore nodded slowly. Damien gestured to Lena. Let's go. They walked out of the study, through the hallways, past security guards who didn't try to stop them, out the front entrance, down the circular driveway to where their SUV waited. Only when they were inside and the vehicle was moving did Lena finally breathe normally. Is it really over? She asked. Damien stared out the window at the city passing by. With them, yes. They're too smart to push further. And with us? He turned to look at her. That depends on what you want. Lena thought about the past week, the terror and protection and manipulation and truth all tangled together until she couldn't separate which parts were real and which were strategy. I want to know if any of it mattered to you, she said quietly. The protection, the concern, the way you dropped everything to come get me that first night. Was any of that real? Damien was quiet for a long moment. Yes, he finally said. All of it, which is why it was so dangerous. Dangerous how? Because I spent 15 years building an empire on the principle that nothing matters more than power. That attachments are weaknesses. That caring about people makes you vulnerable. His expression turned complicated. And then you called me, and I stood up from a meeting I'd spent months arranging without a second thought. I drove across the city. I walked into enemy territory. I started a war with a federal judge, all because someone I barely knew asked for help. So I'm a weakness. No, you're proof that I'm not as untouchable as I thought. The admission hung between them like something fragile. What happens now? Lena asked. Now you go back to your life. I'll make sure your apartment is safe. Get you a new job. Put enough money in your account that you don't have to worry about rent for a while. And then we never see each other again? Damien looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. That would be smarter. But I don't think either of us is good at smart anymore. The SUV pulled up outside Lena's apartment building. The same place she'd lived before everything changed. The same building, same street, same life waiting inside. Except nothing was the same. Damien walked her to the entrance. Security will check the building tonight. Make sure it's clean. You'll be safe here. Okay. They stood in the doorway while rain continued falling and the city moved around them indifferent to everything that had just happened. Lena, Damien started. She kissed him. Not gentle, not romantic, just desperate and honest and carrying every complicated emotion that had built up over the past week of terror and protection and betrayal and truth. When she pulled back, Damien looked more human than she'd ever seen him. Surprised, vulnerable, stripped of the cold calculation that usually armored his expressions. Thank you, she said quietly, for coming when I called, for protecting me even when it was stupid, for not killing me when you thought I'd betrayed you. I never actually thought. Yes, you did, for at least 5 minutes, and I don't blame you. She touched his face gently. But thank you for choosing to find out the truth instead of just eliminating the problem. Damien caught her hand, holding it against his cheek. If you need anything, I know, I'll call. Will you? Lena smiled slightly. Probably not. Unless something terrible happens. Then definitely. That's fair. She pulled her hand away and stepped into her building. At the elevator, she turned back. Damien still stood in the doorway, watching her with an expression that carried too many things to name. The elevator doors closed between them, and Lena rode up to her apartment alone, carrying the weight of everything that had happened, and everything that might still happen, and the dangerous knowledge that she'd somehow survived the most powerful man in New York, deciding she mattered enough to protect. She unlocked her apartment door. Inside, everything was exactly as she'd left it a week ago, except taped to her refrigerator was an envelope. She opened it with shaking hands. Inside was a bank card, a note in Damien's handwriting. 6 months rent, new job contact info below. Security monitoring your building 24/7. You're safe. D. And beneath that, in smaller letters, call me if you change your mind about smart choices. Lena sat down on her couch and started crying, not from fear or relief or happiness, but from the overwhelming complexity of surviving something that should have destroyed her completely. Outside, rain kept falling. The city kept moving, and somewhere in the darkness, Damien Moretti returned to his empire carrying the knowledge that he'd almost lost everything over someone who'd started as strategy and ended as something infinitely more dangerous. 3 weeks passed before Lena stopped checking the locks on her door every hour. 4 weeks before she slept through the night without waking at every sound. 6 weeks before she could walk through her apartment building lobby without her heart hammering against her ribs. The job Damien had arranged turned out to be real. Administrative work for a small publishing house in Brooklyn that asked no questions about her employment gap and paid enough that she didn't have to choose between rent and groceries anymore. The work was quiet, methodical, invisible in the way she'd once craved. But invisibility felt different now. Before, it had been survival strategy, making herself small enough to avoid notice, quiet enough to avoid consequences. Now it felt like a cage she'd built herself into, one careful breath at a time. The security Damien promised was real too. She'd spotted them within the first week. Different faces rotating through shifts, always maintaining distance, never acknowledging her directly. They looked like regular people, joggers, dog walkers, someone reading a newspaper in a parked car. But Lena had learned to see the patterns, the way they positioned themselves to cover entrances, the way they moved when she moved, the invisible perimeter that followed her through the city like a shadow she couldn't shake. It should have felt intrusive. Instead, it felt lonely. Because the protection was real, but the protector stayed away. Damien hadn't called, hadn't texted, hadn't appeared in her life beyond the silent security detail and the bank deposits that showed up like clockwork on the first of each month, always exactly enough to cover rent, never $1 more or less. Lena told herself that was good, clean, the way it should be. She was lying. The truth lived in those moments between. When she'd see something that reminded her of him and reach for her phone before remembering there was nothing to say. When she'd lie awake replaying conversations and trying to separate manipulation from genuine concern. When she'd stand at her window watching the city and wondering if somewhere out there he was doing the same thing. 7 weeks after that final night, her phone rang at 2 a.m. Unknown number. Lena answered anyway. "It's me." Damien's voice, low and careful. "Don't hang up." Her heart kicked into overdrive. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. I just..." A pause, the sound of him breathing. "I needed to hear your voice." Lena sat up in bed, pulling blankets around herself against cold that had nothing to do with temperature. "It's 2 a.m. "I know. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have called." "But you did." "Yes." Silence stretched between them across whatever distance separated their phones. "How are you?" Damien finally asked. "Alive? Employed? Safe? Everything you promised." "That's not what I asked." Lena closed her eyes against the honesty that wanted to spill out. That she was functioning but not living, surviving but not thriving, existing in a space between the life she'd had and the life she'd glimpsed during those terrifying, complicated days in his world. "I'm okay," she said instead. "You're lying." "So are you." Damien made a sound that might have been a laugh. "Fair. Why did you really call?" Another pause, longer this time. When he spoke again, his voice carried weight she'd never heard before. Not the cold calculation, not the controlled authority, just exhausted honesty. "Because I've spent 7 weeks trying to convince myself that staying away was the right choice, that keeping distance was protecting you, that what happened between us was just proximity and adrenaline and circumstances that forced connection where none should exist." He stopped, started again. "And I can't make myself believe it anymore." Lena's throat tightened. "Damien, I'm not asking for anything. I'm just telling you the truth. You asked me once how much of it was real. I didn't have an answer then, but I do now." "What's the answer?" "All of it. From the moment you called me that first night, maybe even before. From 3 years ago when you looked at me like I was something necessary and terrible at the same time. I've been watching you survive, Lena, and somewhere in that watching, I stopped seeing you as strategy and started seeing you as..." He stopped. "As what?" "As someone I'd burn the entire city down to protect." The words hit like a physical force. Lena stood up from her bed and moved to the window, looking out at Brooklyn spread beneath her like a carpet of light and shadow. "That's not healthy." "No, it's not." "That's not something we can build anything real on." "Probably not." "So why are you telling me this?" "Because you deserve to know, and because I'm tired of pretending power means never admitting you care about something more than control." Lena pressed her forehead against the cold glass. "What do you want from me?" "I want you to live your life. I want you to be safe. I want you to forget about me and everything that happened and move forward into something normal and good." His voice dropped lower. "And selfishly, impossibly, I want you to tell me that's not what you want either." "That's not fair." "I know. You can't just call me at 2 a.m. and say things like that and expect... See, I don't expect anything. I'm just telling you the truth because I'm tired of lying to myself about what matters." Lena's reflection stared back at her from the window, pale, tired, carrying shadows under her eyes that 7 weeks of safety hadn't erased. Behind her reflection, the city stretched endlessly, full of people living normal lives built on normal choices. She'd spent her whole life trying to be one of those people, and it had never worked. "Where are you?" she asked quietly. "Why?" "Because if we're going to have this conversation, we should do it face to face." Silence. Then, "I'm outside your building." Lena's heart stopped. She looked down toward the street. A familiar black SUV sat parked across from her entrance, engine off, windows dark. "How long have you been there?" she asked. 3 hours? Maybe 4? I keep telling myself to leave. I keep not leaving. "Come upstairs." "Lena, come upstairs, or I'm coming down. Either way, we're finishing this conversation without phones between us." She hung up before he could argue. 5 minutes later, a knock on her door sent her heart into her throat. She opened it without checking the peephole because she already knew who stood on the other side. Damien looked different, more tired, less armored, wearing jeans and a dark coat that made him look almost ordinary except for the eyes that carried too much weight to ever be normal. "Hi," he said quietly. Lena stepped aside. "Come in." He entered her small apartment like he was entering foreign territory, careful, observant, taking in the space where she lived with the same intensity he probably applied to business negotiations and territorial disputes. "It's not much," Lena said, suddenly self-conscious about the cramped studio, the secondhand furniture, the life that fit into 400 square feet. "It's yours. That makes it matter." The simple statement carried more weight than any compliment about decor or space. Lena closed the door and leaned against it, keeping distance between them because proximity felt dangerous right now. "You said all of it was real." "Yes." "The protection, the concern, the way you looked at me." "Yes." "But you also admitted you'd been watching me for 3 years, that you had people monitoring my apartment, my life, my movements." "Yes." "That's not normal, Damien. That's surveillance, control." "I know. So how am I supposed to believe any of it was genuine when it started from a place of manipulation?" Damien moved to her window, looking out at the same view she'd been studying minutes ago. 3 years ago, your father owed money to people who don't accept payment plans or apologies. When he died, that debt should have transferred to you, should have destroyed you. I made it disappear because I saw something in you that reminded me of myself." "What?" "The ability to survive things that should break you. The refusal to ask for help even when drowning. The way you made yourself invisible because being seen meant being vulnerable." He turned to face her. "I watched you because I recognized you. And recognition became interest. And interest became something I didn't have a name for until you called me that night, and I realized I'd been waiting 3 years for you to need me. That's unhealthy, obsessive, probably criminal in several jurisdictions." Damien's mouth twisted slightly. "But it's the truth. I'm not asking you to accept it. I'm just done pretending it's anything other than what it is." Lena crossed her arms, holding herself together against the honesty that felt more dangerous than any of the violence she'd witnessed. "What is it?" "I don't know what to call it. Care doesn't feel strong enough. Obsession feels too clinical. Love feels—" He stopped, jaw tightening. "Love feels impossible for someone like me." "Why?" "Because love requires vulnerability. It requires trusting someone with pieces of yourself you can't protect. It requires believing that someone else's survival matters more than your own." His expression turned complicated. "And I spent 15 years building an empire on the opposite principle, that nothing matters more than control, that attachments are weaknesses, that caring about people gets you killed. But then you existed, and kept existing, and survived everything that should have destroyed you. And somewhere in watching that survival, I started caring whether you made it, started wanting you to make it, started being willing to burn down judges and kill my own people and risk everything I'd built just to make sure you kept breathing." The words hung in the small apartment like something alive. Lena moved closer, closing the distance between them until she could see the exhaustion carved into his face, the shadows under his eyes that matched her own, the evidence of someone who'd spent weeks not sleeping. "I'm terrified of you," she said quietly. "I know. Not because you're dangerous, but because being near you means accepting that normal life, normal choices, normal safety, isn't actually possible anymore." "I know. And I spent my whole life fighting to be normal, to be invisible, to survive by not being noticed. I know. But I can't go back to that. Not after everything. Not after being seen. She touched his face gently, feeling the tension in his jaw. You ruined invisibility for me, and I hate you for it. And I can't stop thinking about you. And I don't know what to do with that. Damien caught her hand, holding it against his cheek the way he had weeks ago outside her building. You don't have to do anything with it. You don't owe me anything. I can walk out that door right now and you never have to see me again. Is that what you want? No. But what I want doesn't matter if it costs you the life you're trying to build. Lena studied his face, the sharp features that photographs never quite captured, the eyes that saw too much, the mouth that rarely smiled but was capable of such brutal honesty. I don't want normal anymore, she whispered. I thought I did. I thought safety meant invisibility and survival meant keeping my head down and making it through each day without being noticed. And now? Now I think survival means something different. It means being seen and choosing to exist anyway. It means accepting that some connections are dangerous and necessary at the same time. It means... She stopped, searching for words that felt true. It means you. Damien's expression cracked slightly, vulnerability bleeding through the control he usually maintained so carefully. I'm not good for you, he said. Probably not. Being with me means accepting a life that's never fully safe, never fully normal. I know. I can't promise you won't get hurt. Can't promise my world won't bleed into yours in ways that destroy things. I know that too. Then why... Lena kissed him the way she had weeks ago, desperate and honest and carrying every complicated emotion that had built up over 7 weeks of pretending distance, was safer than proximity. When she pulled back, Damien looked at her with an expression that stripped away every defense he'd spent years building. I don't know how to do this, he said quietly. Neither do I. I don't know how to care about someone without trying to control their entire world. Then we'll figure it out together. That's not fair. Healthy? Smart? Lena smiled slightly. Probably not, but I'm done making choices based on what's supposed to work. I'm making choices based on what's true. And the truth is I haven't felt alive in 7 weeks. Not really. Just functioning, just existing. And you think I'm the solution? No. I think you're the problem, and the solution, and the choice I'm making anyway. Damien pulled her closer, his arms wrapping around her like he was trying to shield her from every danger the world contained, including himself. This won't be easy. Nothing about my life has ever been easy. People will come after you, use you to get to me. Let them try. I survived the Whitmores. I survived Marcus. I pulled a trigger to protect myself. She looked up at him. I'm not as fragile as you think. I never thought you were fragile. I thought you were strong enough to survive without me. That's what terrified me. Why? Because it meant I needed you more than you needed me. And need is the most dangerous thing I've ever felt. Lena understood that, understood how terrifying it was to need someone when survival had always meant self-sufficiency. How vulnerability felt like weakness when you'd spent your life building armor. So what do we do? She asked. Damien was quiet for a moment, his arms still holding her, his heart beating steady against her cheek. We try. We accept this is probably going to be complicated and messy, and nothing like what normal people build together. And when it gets too hard, we decide then whether it's worth fighting for or whether we're just making each other worse. It wasn't a romantic answer. It wasn't a promise of forever or declarations of eternal devotion. It was honest, and honesty felt more valuable than any pretty lie. 6 months later, Lena stood in Damien's penthouse, not as a guest, not as someone under protection, but as someone who belonged there because she'd chosen to. The view from 40 stories up turned Manhattan into a galaxy of lights that stretched to every horizon. Behind her, Damien worked at the dining table that doubled as his secondary office, reviewing contracts while she reviewed manuscript submissions for the publishing house. They'd fallen into patterns that felt almost domestic. Mornings where she made coffee and he pretended to care about breakfast. Evenings where work bled into dinner, bled into conversations that ranged from business to books to the strange intersection of their two worlds. It wasn't normal, but it was theirs. There's something I need to tell you, Damien said, setting down his pen. Lena looked up from her laptop. That sounds ominous. The Whitmores are dead. The words landed with surprising weight. Both of them? Lena asked carefully. Car accident, 3 days ago. Investigators are calling it mechanical failure. Brake lines corroded. Vehicle couldn't stop on a mountain road. Lena studied his expression, neutral, calm, revealing nothing. Did you? No, I had nothing to do with it. But you know who did? I have suspicions. Judge Whitmore made enemies in his career. Catherine made more. Someone decided the statute of limitations on their crimes had expired. Damien's expression didn't change. But I legitimately had no involvement. I kept my word. I let them live. Just not everyone else did. No. Lena closed her laptop slowly. Should I be worried? About what? About the fact that your world includes people who make brake lines fail and call it an accident. Yes. You should always be worried about that. But you should also know I'll never let that world touch you unless there's no other option. And if there's no other option, then we handle it together. The certainty in his voice should have terrified her. Maybe it did. But underneath the fear was something else. The strange comfort of knowing someone capable of terrible things had chosen to direct that capability toward protecting rather than destroying her. I need to tell you something too, Lena said. Damien waited. I'm pregnant. The silence that followed was absolute. Damien went completely still, his expression frozen somewhere between shock and something that looked almost like fear. You're 8 weeks. I found out yesterday. I was going to wait to tell you, but then you brought up dead judges, and it felt like the universe was reminding me that secrets in this relationship don't end well. Are you? Damien seemed to struggle with words, which was new for him. Are you okay with this? I don't know yet. I'm terrified. I'm also... Lena searched for honesty. I'm also something else that I can't name, but feels important. Damien stood up and crossed the distance between them, kneeling beside her chair so they were eye level. What do you want to do? I want to keep it. I want to try. I want to believe we can build something that doesn't destroy itself. That's... He stopped. Started again. A child in my world... Our world, Lena corrected. And I know it's dangerous. I know it's complicated. I know every reason this is a terrible idea. But I'm choosing it anyway. Damien's hands came up to frame her face, his thumbs brushing away tears she hadn't realized were falling. I don't know how to be a father. I don't know how to be a mother. We're going to be terrible at this. Probably. People are going to use this child to get to me. To us. Let them try. Something that might have been a smile crossed Damien's face. Brief, genuine, carrying a vulnerability she'd only seen in moments like this when his armor dropped completely. You're the bravest person I've ever met. I'm the most terrified person you've ever met. I just decided terror isn't a good enough reason to stop living. Damien kissed her, slow and careful, and carrying every complicated emotion that existed between them. When he pulled back, his expression had shifted into something that looked almost like hope. We'll protect them, he said quietly, whatever it takes. I know. And we'll try to be better than what we came from. I know that too. And when we fail, because we will fail, we'll figure it out, together. The word together carried weight it hadn't before. Not just proximity or partnership, but something deeper. The kind of commitment that acknowledged how broken both of them were and chose to build something anyway. 18 months after that conversation, Lena stood in the same penthouse holding a 6-month-old daughter who had Damien's dark eyes and her stubborn chin. Elena Moretti, named for both of them, carrying the weight of 2 complicated legacies and too many hopes to count. Outside, the city moved through another evening. Inside, Damien sat on the floor surrounded by paperwork he was ignoring in favor of watching his daughter grab at things with uncoordinated determination. She's going to be trouble, he said. She comes by it honestly, Lena replied. Think she'll forgive us someday for bringing her into this world? I think she'll understand we did our best with what we had. Damien looked up at her with an expression that still carried shadows, but also something lighter. The evidence of someone learning that control wasn't the same as safety, that vulnerability wasn't the same as weakness. I never thought I'd have this, he said quietly. What? Something worth protecting more than my empire. Lena sat down beside him, their daughter balanced between them, creating a triangle of connection that felt both fragile and essential. Do you regret it? No. Every day I'm terrified something will destroy it. But I don't regret it. Good. Because you're stuck with us now. I can think of worse fates. Elena made a sound that wasn't quite a laugh, but close enough. Both parents turned their attention toward her with the kind of focus that probably wasn't healthy, but felt necessary, like if they watched carefully enough, they could shield her from every danger the world contained. They couldn't. They both knew that. But they tried anyway, because trying was what you did when you cared about something more than self-preservation, when you chose connection over safety, when you decided survival meant building something despite knowing it could be destroyed. Tell me we're doing the right thing, Lena said. I can't. I don't know if there is a right thing in situations like ours. Then tell me we're trying. We're trying, every day, despite every reason we shouldn't. It wasn't the answer people were supposed to want, but it was the truth. And truth had become the foundation they'd built this strange, complicated, necessary life on. 5 years after the night Lena called Damien from the Whitmore estate, she stood in a different kind of building, a community center in Brooklyn she'd helped fund anonymously through one of Damien's shell corporations. The space provided resources for people like she'd been, workers trapped in exploitative situations, people struggling to survive in a city designed to crush them, anyone who needed help and had nowhere else to turn. It wasn't charity, it was recognition. The understanding that survival required support systems, that invisibility was sometimes necessary but shouldn't be permanent, that being seen by the right people could mean the difference between drowning and making it to shore. Damien appeared in the doorway, slightly out of place in the community center's worn furniture and chipped paint, but present anyway. Elena held his hand, 5 years old now, and already showing signs of inheriting both parents' stubbornness. Mama working? Elena asked. Mama's always working, Lena replied, kneeling to hug her daughter. But I'm done for today. Want to get dinner? Pizza. Pizza it is. They left together, 3 people who shouldn't fit together based on any normal metric, but had chosen to build something anyway. 3 people carrying complicated histories and uncertain futures, but committed to showing up for each other despite knowing how badly things could go wrong. On the street outside, Lena noticed the security detail that still followed them. Different faces than 5 years ago, but the same invisible protection. The same reality that their life required precautions normal families didn't need. Do you ever regret it? Damien asked quietly, while Elena ran ahead to look at a storefront window. Which part? All of it. Calling me, staying, choosing this instead of something safer. Lena thought about that question, really thought about it, examining the past 5 years with honest assessment, the fear that never fully disappeared, the complications that came with loving someone whose empire was built on violence, the reality of raising a daughter who would someday understand her father's reputation. No, she said finally. I regret nothing. Even the hard parts? Especially the hard parts. Because the hard parts taught me that survival isn't about avoiding difficulty. It's about choosing who you survive with. Damien's hand found hers, fingers interweaving with practiced ease. I love you. I don't say it enough. You show it every day. That's better. Is it? Words are easy. Showing up is hard. You show up. They walked through Brooklyn together while evening settled over the city like a blanket. Elena chattered about her day at school, about friends and teachers, and the complicated social dynamics of 5-year-olds. Lena listened with the kind of attention she'd once reserved for survival calculations, now redirected toward the small human they'd somehow created together. At the pizza place, they squeezed into a booth that was too small for 3 people. Elena demanded extra cheese. Damien ordered something healthy that nobody would actually eat. Lena watched them with the strange awareness that this moment, ordinary, mundane, completely unremarkable, was exactly what she'd been fighting for. Not safety, not invisibility, not protection from the world's dangers, just the ability to exist, to be seen, to survive, not by hiding, but by building something strong enough to withstand the storms that would inevitably come. What are you thinking about? Damien asked. Lena smiled. That I'm glad I called you that night. Even knowing everything that followed? Especially knowing everything that followed. Elena looked between them with the confusion of someone too young to understand adult subtext, but old enough to sense when something important was being said. What happened? Your mama was brave, Damien said, and changed everything. I'm brave too. Yes, you are. Because I'm like mama? Exactly like mama. Lena met Damien's eyes across the table. In that look was every complicated thing that existed between them. The violence and protection, the manipulation and honesty, the fear and commitment. Everything they'd been and everything they were still becoming. It wasn't a perfect life. It wasn't a safe life. But it was theirs. Built on choices that shouldn't have worked but did anyway. Built on the stubborn refusal to let fear dictate possibility. Built on the understanding that sometimes survival meant risking everything for something that mattered more than safety. The pizza arrived. Elena attacked it with enthusiasm that made conversation impossible for several minutes. Lena and Damien ate slowly, stealing glances that carried entire conversations without words. Outside the restaurant window, the city continued its eternal rhythm. People moved through lives they'd built on choices big and small. Somewhere in the distance, Lena's old apartment building still stood, empty now, but holding echoes of the person she'd been before everything changed. She didn't miss that person, didn't regret leaving that life behind, because invisibility had never protected her the way she thought it would. It had just made her smaller and smaller until she'd almost disappeared completely. And then she'd made one phone call that changed everything. One desperate reach toward someone who terrified her. One moment of choosing to be seen instead of hidden. And somehow, impossibly, that choice had led here. To a booth in a Brooklyn pizza place with a man who'd built an empire on ruthlessness, learning to be gentle, and a daughter who would grow up knowing she came from complicated places but was loved anyway. I have something for you, Damien said, pulling a small envelope from his coat. Lena opened it. Inside was a deed to the community center she'd been working at. Her name listed as owner. It's not anonymous anymore, Damien explained. I transferred it directly, legitimately. No shell corporations, no hidden ownership, just yours. Why? Because you built something real there, something that helps people who need it. And I want you to own that completely. No connections to me, no questions about where the money came from, just your work standing on its own. Lena stared at the deed, understanding the gift beneath the gift. This was Damien acknowledging she wasn't just an extension of his world. She was building her own. This was him stepping back enough to let her exist separately while still being connected. This was trust, real, complicated, hard-earned trust. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for showing me there's more than one way to build something that lasts. Elena tugged on Lena's sleeve. Can we get ice cream? Absolutely. They left the pizza place and walked through Brooklyn while the evening deepened into night. Found an ice cream shop that stayed open late. Ordered flavors that would inevitably make Elena hyper right before bedtime. And through it all, Lena felt something she'd spent her whole life chasing and only recently found. Peace. Not the absence of danger or difficulty, but the presence of something worth fighting for, someone worth surviving with. A life built on honesty instead of hiding. Years from now, Elena would ask questions about how her parents met, about the violence that preceded peace, and about the choices that led to this strange, complicated, necessary family. And Lena would tell her daughter the truth, that survival sometimes meant calling the most dangerous person you knew and trusting they'd answer. That protection could look like control, but feel like freedom. That love in their world came with complications, but was worth choosing anyway. She'd tell Elena about invisibility and being seen, about fear and courage being different sides of the same desperate choice. About the night her mother sat alone in a private lounge watching her life unravel and made one phone call that changed everything. But tonight, Elena was 5, and her biggest concern was whether chocolate ice cream was better than vanilla. Tonight, Damien walked beside them looking almost ordinary, except for the security detail shadowing their path. Tonight, Lena was just a woman who'd survived impossible things and chosen to build something anyway. And that was enough. More than enough. It was everything. The city lights burned bright against darkness as they walked home together. 3 people carrying complicated histories but committed to showing up for each other despite knowing how fragile everything they'd built actually was. Because fragile didn't mean worthless. It just meant precious, worth protecting, worth fighting for, worth choosing every single day despite knowing it could be taken away. And as Lena tucked Elena into bed later that night, listening to her daughter's breathing slow into sleep while Damien stood in the doorway, watching them both with an expression that carried too much emotion to name, she understood finally what survival actually meant. Not just making it through each day, but making it matter, making it count, making it worth the price of being seen instead of staying invisible forever. Outside the window, Manhattan glittered like scattered diamonds. Inside, a family slept. And somewhere in the space between those two realities, Lena Vale, who'd once believed invisibility equaled safety, rested peacefully knowing she'd chosen the harder, messier, infinitely more valuable path. The path where she existed, fully, completely, irreversibly. And nothing, not the Whitmores, not Marcus, not the countless dangers Damien's world contained, could take that away from her now. Because she'd learned the most important lesson survival could teach. Sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is exist loudly in a world designed to keep you quiet. And sometimes that danger is worth it, every single time.